All right, so noting that it's 7:01 p.m. on July 21st, 2021, I'll call the Sherborn Board of Health meeting to order. And we'll just quickly do this because we're having a joint meeting with Dover. So I'll give Dover a chance to open their meeting in just a moment. We have quite a number of hearings scheduled for this evening and then some other items on the agenda, but there are some items that we consider to, it's been a long day. We can consider to add to the agenda as not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance of the meeting, and then we get to take a vote whether to add these. One is status of a camp that appears to have been taking place in Sherborn without a camp permit. We can do the reorganization of the board, which we usually do after elections, but since elections were so late and things have been so busy, I just kind of forgot about that. So we could either do that this week or just do it at the following meeting. I'm flexible. And then we have approval of the April 7th, 2021 minutes. And I'd like to add a fourth item, and that is status of something going on in the Charles River that doesn't look good. Possibly a spill, maybe more likely high bacteria or chemical loading that's reduced the dissolved oxygen.
And Daryl, can we add one more item as well?
Okay.
Brandy's ice cream temporary food establishment permit to amend the effective date of that one-day permit.
Okay. And does anyone have anything else beyond those potentially 5 items?
No, but I would think with the agenda we have, if we could delay the reorganization of the board till the next meeting, that might be preferable.
Okay, that sounds good to me. Anybody else have any comments?
Sounds good.
Okay,
Yeah.
so do we have a motion? Oh, sorry. Do we
Yeah.
have a motion to accept the 4 additions, not including number 2 that's shown here?
So moved.
Second,
And then everything will be roll call vote since it's a virtual meeting. Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay, and Dover, would you like to open your meeting?
Yes, Kay. Daryl, I'd like to formally open the Board of Health meeting of July 21st. This meeting is being recorded. I'd like to take the roll call. I am Stephen Kruskal, acting chair. And Kay, can you identify yourself, please? Kay?
Kay Peterson, present.
Okay. Thank you. I notice on the list of participants that we have at least 2 Dover residents present, Carolyn Malloy and Tracy Mannion. And we will be open for comments as far as our meeting goes after this presentation by the Health and Hygiene Committee to start the discussion on the possibility of mandating COVID-19 vaccination tools. Karen Hyatt is our recording secretary for this meeting.
Yes, I'm here.
Good. Okay. We're open.
Okay, and Matt or Kay, I know you're all on the Health and Hygiene Committee. Did you want to kick off the discussion?
Mappy is better for brevity than I am, so I think he's going to open us up.
All right, sounds good. So happy to do so. If I get paged away in the middle, I'm sure Matt and Kay will take over. So the Health and Hygiene Committee has had a chance to meet and discuss this issue. And I think I'd like to present a few things as we go through this, some data, and then some of the considerations we've made.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing so that you can do that.
Yeah, or if you just want to share the
The
PDF,
thing that was sent around? Yep,
yeah,
I can do
that would work.
All right.
So we'll bring that up first. So I think as we started to think about sort of the role of mandating vaccinations, we wanted to start by getting a sense of where we currently stand. And so this is information that Matt Vitale put together based on sort of publicly available data. We have this for Sherborn, and then I'll show Dover in a second. But just to orient everybody to this, we wanted to get a sense of what proportion of the population we think has been vaccinated in the two towns. And so this is a little tricky. We have data from the state on vaccinations by age group, and including those with at least one dose and those fully vaccinated, which as usual is defined as 2 doses of Pfizer, Moderna, or 1 dose of Johnson & Johnson. So we have those numbers, the numerator numbers. The denominator numbers are a little tougher. And so what you see here is an estimated population by age group. And so this is based on 2019 data, based on the total population of Sherborn, which I've listed at the top there, and then estimated proportions from that data by each age group. So these are italicized because it's an estimate. So we think it's reasonably accurate, but you can see it's not perfect. And you can tell that because if you look at some categories, it looks like we've had more vaccines than we have people. And so for that reason, we've sort of just listed nothing above 95% because we know there's some fudging here.
Mm-hmm.
So we can go through and look at this. And I think if you look at some bottom line numbers, the bottom right hand corner shows that based on these estimates, about 94% of the total population of Sherborn is fully vaccinated. That's eligible, just to be clear, that's eligible. So this doesn't count those under age 12. If we look specifically at the school age populations, we have those that are 12 to 15, it looks like fully vaccinated in the 89% range, and then a little bit less in 16 to 19. And so that should incorporate really the range of school age kids that are eligible at this point in time. One thing I might comment on is that it does look like this 16 to 19 age range is a little bit lower, but this is sort of also the group that may be away from home, and we may not have full vaccination data, and it's a little hard to know. But I think looking at this, we have reasonable estimates that we have at least greater than 80%, in many cases greater than 90 or 95% vaccination amongst most of these age groups at this point in time. So if you want to scroll to the next page, this will give a sense of Dover. And so the numbers are fairly similar for Dover. So the sort of bottom line number in the bottom right corner is 95% of the total eligible population. Many age categories as well, with again, probably the lower categories being the 12 to 15 age range. 16 to 19 is about above 95% in Dover, but lower numbers above 70% still in the 12 to 15 age range. But I think the bottom line here, and I will also note that in these, there's a higher number with at least 1 dose, which is also not surprising given that this was sort of the last group to become eligible. So our hope is that most of those convert. And as we can see from the other numbers, like in most cases, we're converting. So I think the bottom line here is that we have already really good uptake within our communities overall, including within these populations. And so I think we started our discussions from the standpoint of thinking about how much we gain with a mandate, meaning how many more people are we going to capture if we actually mandate this? And I think some of the answer is that it's not that many. We'll get some people, but we're already most of the way there. And so thinking about it through that lens, we wanted to sort of think about a few other considerations. And so I think the first is that we still don't at this point have an FDA approved vaccine, right? It's under EUA. I personally believe it's very, very safe. Having looked a lot at the data, obviously I've been vaccinated, my family's been vaccinated. So I believe it's safe, but we're still under an EUA. And I think we've seen a lot of large organizations, including Mass General Brigham, where Matt and I work, that have decided they're not going to mandate anything until full FDA approval. So I think as a baseline, the health and hygiene felt like that's where we should start from. We wouldn't want to be mandating until there's full approval. Beyond that, we wanted to think about sort of specifically the risks and benefits of vaccine in these age groups. And so to begin with, I want to talk about the group that's not eligible yet. So the elementary school kids, those under 12. So estimates are that they're going to start looking for approval in September. Alexi Boudreau, the pediatrician who works with us, said that more recently it seems like the FDA is going to want more safety data in this group. So it may be further into the fall before we have an EUA in this age group. So certainly not for the beginning of school, it'll come later. And I think the fact that the FDA is looking for more safety data in this group really comes to the point we want to make. So this is a group of people meaning the younger children, who are really at low risk from the COVID disease itself. If they get disease, they tend not to be symptomatic. They certainly don't have severe disease. And really, I think we've all been surprised by this, but kids just don't get sick from COVID. And so that puts us in a position where we'd be potentially mandating a vaccine, which has risks, small risks, which I acknowledge, but which has risks and which doesn't confer a lot of personal benefit on the individual. And so I think that makes us a little concerned. I will say that as a parent and as a physician, both of my kids are going to get vaccinated as soon as they can. But I'm a little uncomfortable mandating a vaccine for young children when they don't stand to personally benefit too much, but they do bear the risk of that vaccine. And that's sort of where the Health and Hygiene Committee came down, is that in these youngest kids, it doesn't feel appropriate. This is not like flu. It's not like chickenpox, where we're mandating vaccines for kids that can experience very severe disease. In this case, the risk-benefit balance is much closer. And so I think we came down with not feeling comfortable mandating in the youngest age group. When we think about the older kids, there are somewhat different ethical considerations, but still things to think about. They probably are a little more like adults, but still probably have less severe disease than older people. We have good uptake already. And this is an age group in which, as physicians, and Alexi was really, I think, instrumental in us understanding this, we want to really start to allow these people to have agency over their own healthcare decisions, meaning that they're becoming individuals, they are making their own choices. And partly for this reason, we felt uncomfortable mandating a vaccine, particularly before it's approved, but mandating a vaccine that, again, has lesser benefit for them than it may for older people, while they bear the risk. And so I think, as we thought about this a lot, all of us are very much in favor of vaccination, and all of us are going to do everything we can to encourage everyone to get vaccinated. And I think everyone on the Health and Hygiene Committee with school-aged children is planning to have them vaccinated as soon as it's possible. But we didn't feel like a mandate, particularly in the younger students, makes sense. And we felt sort of the same about the older students. I think that we want to encourage people to vaccinate. I think there'll be incentives to vaccination. You know, one thing is that I can tell you as a parent, this past year, anytime my kid had the sniffles, I lived in fear of the 2 weeks we were going to be out if we had a positive test, right? Or I lived in fear of those emails that there had been a case in school and wondering if I was going to be a contact and be out of school. And the vaccine takes away some of that fear, right? If you're vaccinated, you're not going to be knocked out if you're a close contact, right? And so I think there are incentives there to make it happen. But I think a mandate is further than we're ready to go at this point in time. And that last point is key. I think, as we've said all along, this is a moving situation, right? Right now, we have high community uptake of vaccination. We have low community prevalence of disease. And we have disease that is relatively mild in younger students. If things change, if there are new variants that are causing more severe disease in the young, if there is much increased in community prevalence, we can revisit this. But our recommendation at this point was that we not mandate vaccination for students. Matt or Kay, do you have anything to add to that?
I would echo all that. I think the one comment I would make is when, we sort of say kids don't get sick. I think that's Matt wearing his ICU doctor hat, where I think we're not seeing kids generally get ICU level sick. I think when we think about the impact of COVID, it's both for those kids or for their family members who may also be at risk for ineffective vaccination that they may have received. But I think in general, the point holds that the medical risk for grandchild and grandparent are very, very different for COVID, and that colors the level of risk, minute though it may be, for vaccination and pursuing it. I think the other point that came up in our discussions is right now there's no other area of town that we're mandating vaccines. So we're not mandating for our firefighters, for our EMTs, for our police officers, for residents at Woodhaven, or for many other population groups. And so picking a relatively low risk of complication group, though not zero risk, felt like not the right place to mandate vaccination, particularly when the change in safety from getting that last 5 or 10% was felt to be low. That certainly could change if either we have state level mandates. I would, say that we plan to adhere to the state, or if we find that Delta, the next variant, has a really just different risk profile, that certainly could change it too. And with that, I'll go back on mute.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
I just have one comment to make, and that is that just to be sure people understand that when we talk about the younger children being at very low risk, that what that means is that there's a very, very low probability that something severe, that they will have severe COVID disease, but that can happen, and certainly there have been deaths in younger children, and I think it's important to acknowledge that, because if you happen to have known a young child to whom that's happened, it's a major event, but it's incredibly rare compared to the serious complications that occur in older people.
Thank you, Matt and Kay, for putting some check on my definition of sick. But I concur completely. Like it's I don't mean to downplay the potential there. I think at a population level, the risk is lower. So thank you both for adding that.
And I note that Lisa had her hand up.
Yeah, I was trying to be polite. So I guess I just have a couple thoughts and comments. So I do have one child that's in college, which I know is not the same as being in a public school, where they have mandated that all the students, staff, and faculty get vaccinated. And the rationale is so that way, not only, it's not as much concern for how severe the illness might be in like the student population, but all the interactions that people have. So when I'm thinking about kids, they're playing sports with other towns. Other towns might have higher rates, of COVID. The Delta variant, seems like it's more transmissive than some of the other variants. So I guess in lieu of mandating it, which I understand the rationale that Matt laid out, what is the contemplation? Are we going to be requiring, masking of all kids in school? How are we going to handle the sports issue where you're going to be interacting with other towns, many of which have much lower vaccination rates and higher, starting to climb Delta variant rates? So I guess I'm just sort of weighing with like, okay, I understand the rationale about kids not getting as sick, but that doesn't mean that they can't transmit it to other people. That doesn't mean that there can't be interplay with other towns that have higher rates. And so, and there's a potential for certain vaccines to be less effective for people like us, the older people who can get sicker against the Delta variant. So I just, I'm wondering about, so what's the big picture? If we're not going to mandate it, what sort of measures are we going to be taking?
So I think a couple points to make there. One, the masking question is still very much active. And I think we're waiting on further DESI guidance on that. And as you may know, the American Pediatric Association came out with some guidance on that. So that's an ongoing question for sure, which I think we can't fully get into here. For extracurriculars like sports and other exposures, I expect we're going to see some of the same modifications and tracking like we had last year. But particularly if COVID is still prevalent and districts aren't mandating vaccination, we're still going to expect for contact tracing. We're still going to expect that there may be some modifications to distancing indoors and things like that. We don't have all those details yet, and so that's one of those things that falls under the category of like we have to wait and see a little bit. I think one other point to make is that one thing we do plan to require is documentation. So the school nurses are going to know who's vaccinated and who's not vaccinated, and that's consistent with what we've always done. And so that is going to aid in contact tracing and aid in understanding who's a contact and things like that. And it will allow us to be able to get aggregate data to understand if there are pockets of extracurriculars where there's low uptake or something like that. You could imagine that we might be able to look at that. We obviously can't get individual level data, but that data will exist.
And so, and what about testing? Is that also just still out there? Like we haven't sort of put our arms around, like, since if we're not going to mandate it, there's the question of, are we going to mandate masking in certain situations? Or are we going to still continue with some kind of testing at the school level?
So I think one of the questions there, so I think for masking, I think we're sort of left where we were at the end of the year for now, pending further guidance, which was masking indoors. We have to sort of wait and see, and I think we expect to hear about that in early August. For testing, the issue becomes we need to know if it's still going to be subsidized by the state, and that also has not been answered yet. I think given our vaccination rates, it may not be cost effective for us as a different district if we have to do that entire lift, and that may change things, but we don't have that answer yet.
And I see his hand up too.
Yes, I was going to say there are a number of people with hands up, but I'd like to give the Dover Board of Health a chance to speak.
In your recent meetings and deliberations, Health and Hygiene Committee, did you discuss whether the thought of mandating vaccinations for teachers and other school personnel?
So for us, we focused a lot more on the students, in part because I think the group of us that were there was a sort of physician part of the team. And so I think in general, philosophically, would be most supportive of a philosophy that was consistent for all members of the school community. So if we're mandating vaccination for students, it would be hard to imagine not to do it for teachers. At the same time, I know that for MGB, there's a ton of layers of kind of labor law that goes into that too, that's outside of where we're the experts. So I think philosophically, we'd say, we'd be in favor of concordance between staff and students in terms of whatever the vaccination requirements are. But we didn't land on a final punchline for that.
And I think to just put a fine point on that, and it's partly because we need more interaction with the district, I think, before we can make much progress there. But we plan to be meeting with them again in early August.
Any other comments or discussion from the board before we, okay, I see you. Go ahead.
I would just say that everything we've said tonight really needs to be taken with a small or large grain of salt, depending on your point of view. But I think things are so much in flux that in a month's time, we could be saying very different things than what we're saying tonight. And I just want to make that point. This is nothing we've said is written in stone at this point.
And I'll echo that. I like what you've discussed so far, and it makes sense to me, and particularly because it would be a really big deviation from something that just has the EUA at the moment. But I do think, yes, things are in flux. So, and I think there are other measures that we could take that could be protective if need be in the near term. So anything else from the Dover Board of Health? Otherwise, I'll go to T. Mannion and then Ken Corning.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for that presentation. It was wonderful. This is Tracy Mannion. I have a Dover resident, born and raised here my whole life. I'm a member of the Regional School Committee, and by the way, I did meet with our new superintendent today, Kathleen Smith, and she did want to be here to listen to all of this, but I did tell her it would be recorded, and I'll be taking notes for her. So thank you for that presentation. A lot of our constituents have asked questions regarding two things, actually, and you've already answered the first one, which is wonderful with your presentation about mandating these vaccines. The second one, however, that's coming up a lot is the masks on the children. And I know it sounds like we will be getting more information from Desi. I'm assuming that's before the fall. Has anybody been looking into, I did it a little bit myself. I have a doctorate in nursing, a master's in public health, and I actually do research. And one of the tests for the companies that I work for is to actually look into these vaccines and COVID and the survival rate in their immune compromised patients. One of the things I had studied was the positives and the negatives of the masks. Would anybody like to discuss that? Because it seems that some of the data I'm finding is that the masks can actually be quite unclean. There's a very small study out there showing some very dangerous pathogens in these masks. And when I'm looking at the fatality rates or the rates for COVID, the mortality rates for COVID, excuse me, what I'm also noticing is that the rates of pneumonia seem to be going up, and that a lot of the deaths seems to be caused by pneumonia out there. And that's even more so than the COVID rates. Is there any talk about whether or not the pathogens that are in these children's masks could be causing those infections and some of the mortality that we're seeing?
So Tracy, what I would say is, for us on the Sherborn board, we have to manage the scope of the conversation a little bit. And I think especially in this case where we need to wait for DESI guidance, I do expect we'll have another meeting on the topic. And I certainly invite you to send any of the materials that you've come across to Kay or to any of us. And we're certainly happy to review and learn more. But I just don't think we can fully get into that tonight, although I do expect a public meeting before the start of the school year to review that. I think it's a big question for a lot of people.
Yes, it is. Thank you. And that's why I just wanted to bring it up, just so you knew that a lot of constituents are worried about both of those, a possible mandate and a possible mask mandate too.
Okay, so as Matt said, it would be good to get that information. And just because we've posted this discussion as just about the vaccinations, we really shouldn't springboard into that other lengthy topic, which we also couldn't do justice to because we have 2 minutes before a variance hearing, so it wouldn't be as satisfying. But okay, so Ken?
Okay, so thank you. 2 minutes is a tall order, but here we go. So thank you for your diligence. I also agree that children in the under 20 cohort are really not at risk for massive disease. 0.06% death rate, 0.06. So it's very low. There is a vitamin protocol that I think is not well understood. Vitamin D, A, C, zinc, selenium, quercetin, melatonin. Those are steps that any concerned parent can take to get their children's terrain properly set for this disease. I do believe that N95 masks are a choice that people should consider and should heavily consider indoors. But there are treatments. There are protocols for the disease. If you catch it, it's ivermectin and fluvoxamine. There are peer-reviewed studies on these. So that there are treatments. A vaccine should be a choice. It should be a choice because there are treatments. There are 10,991 deaths related to the vaccines on the VAERS database. That's 11,000 people. And you could argue that last week, more people died from the vaccine than died from COVID-19. Now, I know that's probably something that you don't believe, so I challenge you to look at that, look at those numbers and consider that. We're only just now starting to see the data from the vaccines. And so I would really encourage you to consider that. The myocarditis is real, and there are concerns from the Japanese data about where the lipid particles accumulate. And so if you don't know about these issues, I would encourage you to look at them because there is no long-term safety data. And you have no ability to undo a vaccine if this turns out to not be what we think it is. And so, so when you take choice away, you completely do not, you cannot undo anything. And you do open yourselves to lawsuits and litigation. And so I'm not saying it's not a threat or anything, it's just the reality of the times that we live in. So choice is imperative, especially given all the unknowns. And we do know how to manage COVID. And lastly, I'll say, there are other vaccines coming like Novavax that are going through the same trials. They're different technology. They're not mRNA. And so if you mandate a vaccine, there are 3 choices now. If you mandate those, you're robbing the person of a choice 4 or 5. And, you know, we've heard the stories of blood clotting in the Johnson & Johnson one. So it's a mixed message. I'd say leave it to choice. Do the things that we know how to do. Use the vitamins, use proper masking, and really pay attention to the data. Because in my opinion, I think it's somewhat one-sided as of late. Thank you.
Ken, thanks so much for your comment. I think, I suspect that you and I have different frameworks with which we interpret information and different experiences. So again, I spent the last year with COVID patients and certainly took care of critically ill 20-year-olds who were disabled. So I think that, again, I recognize that that's an anecdotal piece. I think there are a number of pieces and comments that you made that are sort of outside the framework of information as I understand it as a kind of Western medical practitioner. I appreciate those differences, but I think for the purposes of the record, the Board of Health would say that many of the assertions in terms of validated studies and peer-reviewed don't align with the literature that's available or the large compendiums. Again, recognizing that we may disagree there, it sounds like to the degree possible, empowering families like yours with the ability to make choices for their children is something that we saw as important and that you see as important too. I think that one of the really important things that needs to be part of the record is that consistently for all of us on health and hygiene, I think all of us who've taken care of patients with COVID, like this is a devastating disease that is disabling, killing, destroying, and collectively we need to do the best we can to work together. And I hope tonight was a chance for us to have those discussions and hear each other while recognizing we may believe very different things, and would certainly appreciate the engagement for people taking time out of their evening. I think with that, we do need to close the public comment portion. And Daryl, do we need to, in this case, do we need to vote on a non-action? Since we're not mandating vaccine, is there any vote required?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask the Health and Hygiene Committee as to whether the school is looking for something formal from us.
I think this came up more from community questions about it. I think that DESE has not suggested that they're planning to mandate it. I think the school is planning to gather this vaccination information as it does with all others. I don't think they need to vote from us to make that mandatory because it's consistent with existing practice, but that would then be limited to the school. I think that would be helpful validation data for us because of the limitations with the denominator that Matt B described.
And then Ellen, if you could just mention, this would be, because it's not FDA approved yet, it would be so different a path from anything else that, yes, I'm not sure that we need to vote to confirm that we're not going to take an unusual course of action.
And I see Steve's got his hand up on the Dover board.
The Dover board is looking for a motion to adjourn.
Sounds good.
Oh, okay.
Can I have a motion to adjourn? Okay,
Does Kay have to second that, I think?
she has to provide it. I said it. I second.
So moved.
Second. Thank you.
Okay, so I think
Bye.
then thank you. And I think Sherborn can follow and not have a vote. And that makes sense to you, Ellen?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right.
Now let's move to something really controversial and talk about septic system replacement.
Okay. All right, so it's 7:30 and we have a scheduled variance hearing for a septic replacement at 7 Surrey Lane. And do we have all of the green cards?
Yes, we do.
Okay, and I think we have at least one abutter to the property. So generally what we'll do is the engineer is going to present the reasons that variances are needed for the property. The board he will explain why. The board may ask questions, the agent may make some comments, and then if you have a question that you haven't heard an answer to yet, or have something else, some other issue you want to raise, then you can do that after we get through our basic process. So let me bring up the plan so we can all look at it.
This is Dan McIntyre representing the homeowner.
Hi, Dan.
So the owners of 7 Surrey are readying their house for sale and did not pass a Title V inspection. We were retained to design a new one, which we did. There's a number of constraints on this property that impact the design, and they're related to the wetlands, which you'll see in the lower right-hand corner of the lot is all wet. And then the abutters wells, we've got the on-site well takes up pretty much half the yard.
Mm-hmm.
An abutter well on 7 Surrey comes into the property as well.
Oh,
And then
7 Surrey, oh, over here. Yeah.
and that's Thoroughbred Lane down there.
Oh, sorry. Oh, there's another one. I see
Yeah,
3
yep.
Surrey.
3 Surrey, yep.
Oh, okay.
So we're really squeezed in between the wetlands, which has a 50-foot offset buffer that we have to stay away from, and the wells. So we're really limited to that one area that we put the system. When we did the soil testing, it was a very high groundwater, so we weren't able to do a percolation test. So we went with the sieve analysis allowed by the state to come up with a design rate. And generally that's a very conservative rate. So it's a relatively large system for the existing 4-bedroom house. But we didn't manage to fit in there using an alternative technology. We're using the GeoMat system here, which is a pressure dosing system, which gives good dispersal of the effluent across the field. And it also is approved by the state for a 2-foot offset to groundwater, because we also had a high groundwater condition at this site. So we are looking to put in, we have 2 tanks shown there. One's a septic tank, one's the pump tank to pressurize the leach field. And then we are mounding up the yard slightly to get that groundwater offset. And with that, I think we can take questions.
Okay, this looks like yes, as you pointed out, there aren't a lot of options for location that meet, well, I guess you have some variances, but you're trying to meet as many possible requirements at a time.
We're asking for a few variances, but they're all related to the constraints I talked about, the wells and the wetland and the property line.
And was there a trench type system in here before, or a cesspool? Can't recall.
No, there was actually a conventional system. There was a septic tank and a stone leaching bed in that area.
Okay.
And it appeared to us that it may have been encroaching in the 100-foot well buffer of the on-site well, and just about 100 feet from the well at 3 Surrey.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so some of these issues, it's not going to be worsening, and it will be improving, and certainly the functioning of the system is anticipated to be better. Would that be a fair statement?
I'd call it a slight improvement on the horizontal separations, but a big improvement on getting the system out of the groundwater table.
Mm-hmm. And I'll just note that one of the advantages of that is that a drying out period in that dry space between the bottom of the leaching field and the groundwater helps to kill off bacteria and viruses in particular. So as you point out, getting the system out of the groundwater is wonderful, because then there's a chance for that. Otherwise, they can just survive and move through the groundwater. So that's a big improvement right there.
And we did go through conservation and they did approve this location.
Okay. Any other board members have comments or questions? Or Mark, do you have any comments?
No, just what Dan said. It's been that this is another difficult area to put a replacement septic system in, but it's an improvement to what's there now. So I agree with Dan on the presentation.
Mhm. Okay, and are there any abutters or anyone else attending who has a question? Okay, if not, let me bring up the variances. And certainly if something comes to mind as we go through the variance requests, let us know. All right. So here are the requested variances. Do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 5.1?
So moved.
Seconded.
And any other comments or questions? Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Matt Vitale, aye.
And do we have a motion to grant a variance to 8.01?
So moved.
I'll second. Any other comments? Daryl, I.
Matt.
Matt Beavers, aye. Sorry.
I.
Okay, so that was Lisa, I. All right, also.
Rebecca Honeywell, I. I did not hear Lisa.
Matt Vitale, aye.
I did
All right.
say I, sorry.
And do we have a motion to grant a variance to 8.02?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any other comments? Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay, and do we have a motion to grant a variance to 10.1A regarding the well offsets?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, other comments? Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Do we have a motion to grant a variance to 10.2, which has to do with the wetlands offset that was reviewed and approved by Concom?
So moved.
Seconded.
Other comments? Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Matt Vitale, aye.
And this one was a property line offset. So do we have a motion to grant a variance to 10.2?
So moved.
Seconded.
And other comments? It wasn't mentioned, but it was indirectly that the siting of this was quite tight and the space available.
Yeah, it looked like it.
Yeah. So Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Matt Vitale, aye.
All right, and now we'll move into the Title V local upgrades. So some are Sherborn level regulations, but these overlap at the state level as well. So do we have a motion to grant a variance to 15.4051H?
So moved.
Seconded.
Comments? Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Do we have a motion to grant a variance to 15.4051I?
So moved.
Daryl, if I can on this.
Oh,
Yes.
Yeah,
Let's second it. I'll
yeah,
second
oh,
it.
okay, I thought it was, I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, just for discussion purposes, it should be noted that the soil was uncompacted. Again, it was uncompacted. If it was compacted, it would make some major changes to what could be requested. But in this case, the soil was uncompacted, but again, very wet. So it's this process was needed.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. Okay, other comments or questions? Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye. Sorry, my mouse is sticky. I'm missing the mute button, but aye.
Lisa,
Everything's
aye.
sticky now.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Matt Vitae, aye.
Okay, and do we have a motion to grant a variance to 15.4051J?
So moved. Oops.
Seconded then.
Okay, any other comments? Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Matt Vitae, aye.
Okay, so we can close the hearing, and are the plans ready for approval, Mark?
Yes, they are, Darrow, conditional to a deed recording for the garbage grinder prohibition and the use of a innovative alternative septic system.
Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the plans subject to receipt of those deed recordings?
So moved.
Second.
Other comments? Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Matt Vitae, aye.
Okay. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
And let's see, we have 2 minutes. I guess that maybe the soccer camp is short enough and we could come back to it if we need more time.
Tom wants to be here and he won't be here until 8:50 to discuss that.
Oh, okay.
So anything for Tom, if you wouldn't mind waiting till 8:50.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Oh yeah, that's Tom.
Sorry.
I don't know that there's anything else that's simple here.
Oh, you could do the Grandy's ice cream. It's just that it was added to the agenda tonight. And it's just a change of date.
Okay.
That was at the last meeting, the board approved the temporary food, permit for, actually it was supposed to be held today. And the Council on Aging canceled it for today because they were expecting rain. And they rescheduled it for next Wednesday, the 28th. Okay. So if you can just approve that 1-day permit for the 28th rather than today.
Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the adjustment to the permit for Granby's?
So moved.
Second.
Other comments? Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Matt Vitae, aye.
Okay, I'll get started. So we have a variance hearing for a septic replacement and expansion at 31 Oldfield Drive. And have we received the green cards?
Yes, we have.
Okay, and so Dan McIntyre is going to present, and let me open up some files for that.
So 31 Oldfield, this home is not for sale, but is experiencing septic problems. It's actually breaking out to the ground surface, and the homeowners are kind of on a pumping schedule right now to keep it down, and they've cut back on their water use to manage this until we can get a system approved. So we did the soil testings out there. It was relatively good soils. The groundwater table was at 5 feet, I believe. And we designed a Title V compliance system using conventional stone and pipe. And we included a reserve area in the front yard. We did have to put in a pump because of the elevation change. The existing system wasn't in the groundwater table, but it didn't have the 4 feet of Title V requirement, or the 5 feet required by Sherborn. So we are raising the front yard up slightly to make this work. The original approved system was for 4 bedrooms back in the 1970s. We reviewed the house, and there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of structural changes to it, but based on room count, it would be technically a 5-bedroom house. So we designed this as the 5-bedroom. So we're asking for the +1 on this particular lot. We are asking for as I said, it's Title V compliant. We're asking for 2 waivers under the Sherborn regs, both related to the groundwater table. One is to use a 4-foot groundwater offset instead of 5. And then we're also requesting the waiver on the depth to groundwater. I wasn't really sure whether 5 feet complies with that regulation or it has to be greater than 5 feet. So out of an abundance of caution, requested that waiver.
Meeting is being recorded.
Okay, I'm not sure what that was, but
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
okay. All right. I have a question. When you've had a system that's failed and you're putting another system back where it was, as you're excavating, if there's something that's changed with the subsurface that is causing it to fail now and might then do the same with the new system, can you determine that when you're excavating and prepping for the new system?
Yeah, so the process when we're replacing a system in the location of the old system, generally they're saturated. So the contractor will come in with a pump truck and pump out all the liquid, and then they'll pull out the system. And at that time, we'll do the bottom inspection. Mark and I will come out and take a look at the system. And at that time, that's our opportunity with whatever system we're doing. That's our opportunity to take a look to make sure that our soil testing is accurate and that we didn't miss anything. So that's time we look for those things. And if we see something that's an anomaly or might affect the operation of the system, we'll kind of stop and step back and look at the design.
If I can too, Dan, I'd just like to add, if we don't have 5 feet of naturally occurring soil from the excavation, thankfully the reserve area, although not tested, is not disturbed. And I'm going to suggest at the time of plan approval that the board allow you to choose that area if you can't get 5 feet of naturally occurring soil that's not contaminated, if that works throughout the process.
Okay.
Good idea. All right. Let's see, so does anyone have any questions on the board? Are there any abutters here or anybody else who has a question who's on this evening? Okay. And it's okay. We will move on to the variance that's requested. All right, so these are closely related. So, Mark, where does it fall out of curiosity? Is it right on the nose at 5 feet or?
It is right on the nose, 60 inches. Yes, 5 feet.
Okay, and so it's required to get a variance because it's, I mean, does it
Yeah,
need the
it's
variance?
kind of within an inch one way or the other. So I think,
Yeah,
as Dan said, to be on the safe side,
yeah, okay,
it'd be best to grant it.
okay. All right, so do we have a
And
motion?
Daryl, if I
Sorry.
can note, I'm talking about 8.02, not
Yes.
8.01. Okay, thank you.
Yes, okay. So do we have a motion to grant a variance section 8.01?
So moved.
Seconded.
Other comments? Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye, and then I apologize. I'm gonna have to leave the hearing to answer a page.
Okay,
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Matt Vitale, aye.
and do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 8.02?
So moved.
Second.
Daryl, aye.
Oh, Matt's off. So Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Matt Vitale, aye.
All right, and I'll close the hearing. And Mark, are the plans ready for approval?
Yes, Daryl, with a couple of notes. One, as we just talked about, that if in the excavation we find that we don't have uncontaminated soil in 5 feet of it, then I would ask the board to allow it to be switched over to the opposite side where the reserve is being prepared, and let the old area dry out. That would be probably a beneficial part of the approval in my view. It does also indicate on the plan, but I'd like the board to make it as part of their vote, if you don't mind, is to make sure the 2 dead wells, as they're called, are abandoned, so that it be a condition of the vote that the wells be abandoned.
And do you think they should be abandoned prior to construction?
Yes, and that way we'll get that certification prior and not do a pre-construction until then. And then last but not least, they do need a deed recording for a garbage grinder prohibition. So that it's like a 3 points of the approval. If you want me to read any part, I'd be glad to.
Okay, and so Dan, is that manageable to abandon those wells prior to beginning the other work?
I think so. I know the homeowners are anxious to get their septic done because they are experiencing failure.
And they go in parallel for a bit, Mark?
That's what I was going to suggest. We allow building additions to go parallel. So I'd suggest that they be abandoned by the time the construction is complete and prior to the final grading.
Okay.
Yeah, there's not much known about those 2 particular wells.
Mm-hmm.
I added them to the plan just to make sure that they get properly abandoned. But I didn't do any research at town hall to see if that was already done or not, and the homeowners weren't sure. They didn't have too much luck with the well drillers.
Yeah, and the well drillers checked with the office and we had no information.
Okay, thank you. So
Okay.
I'll let the homeowners know that they should get started on that as soon as possible.
Mhm.
And Dan, let them know that it has to be done by a licensed well driller.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, great. So do we have a motion to approve the plans subject to the 1 deed recording, the well abandonment as described, and the provision for a field change subject to conditions encountered?
So moved.
Second.
Any other comments? Daryl, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay, great. Let's see.
Thank
Okay, thanks, Dan. All right, 10 minutes till your next one. All right.
Daryl, do you want
All
to
right,
talk about the Charles River issue?
Yes, that's just the one I think would fit in here. So there, I don't know who first noticed it, but I'm sure lots of people have noticed it by now. There is a sheen of, actually I'd call it more of a film. It does not appear to be petroleum-like material, but there's something going on with the Charles River and it smells dreadful. And this surface condition has been noted for hours today. So it wasn't a small event that, happened and flowed down the river and done with it. So I don't know how many others have been out looking at it in different places, but in Sherborn and at the two bridges, and Mark, correct me if I'm wrong on some of this, but first at the bridge that connects Farm Road and Bridge Street, and then at the Route 27 bridge over the Charles. There were representatives from Sherborn, including Mark, Zach, and Sean, and then me just for the Route 27 one, and representative from Charles River Watershed Association, and 2 people from Mass DEP. So we took a look at it. We called the Medfield wastewater treatment plant to see if there had been some release from there. No answer. I left a message. But there were reports that it was also observed farther upstream from where the Medfield wastewater treatment plant discharges into the Charles. So not that. But because of we had this meeting, Mark and I didn't continue on with Mass DEP, as they were going to go check other locations upstream to see if there's a starting point that's identifiable. One hypothesis that Tom Trainer had is that it could be blue-green algae, cyanobacteria, because it has a baby bluish hue to it with some white streaks. Mark did a test to see if it broke up like algae, though, and it did not do that. Kind of held together like a film. And it is a putrid smell, possibly a hydrogen sulfide smell.
Are we
So
sure
something-
it's not decaying plant matter? Because
Well, if I
sometimes
can,
that can be it.
I can add a little bit if it's okay, Daryl.
Yep.
So yeah, the reason I just kind of threw a rock in one, it was about 10 feet below our feet. But it definitely isn't iron bacteria, because that would have broken up, and I've tested for iron bacteria before. But Daryl, I agree with you. The more I think about it, it didn't seem to be petroleum, because we get the smell of petroleum as well.
Right.
But DEP had investigated this area, I don't know how many years ago. And according to Chief Ward, our fire chief, he indicated that one of our firefighters remembers years ago that the same issue occurred, and DEP may be looking into sewage treatment plants. Might they be? It appears that Medfield's ruled out, but there was discussion on tributaries to the Charles that are on, that sewage treatment plants are on. So it's inconclusive. So I'm not going to say, if it's accurate or not, but I agree with Daryl. The smell is putrid. And the more I think about it, Daryl, petroleum, I think would have had an off odor of petroleum.
Right.
But really amazing in this is it was just so persistent. It never stopped.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, so it could just be CSOs?
Well, yeah, so there are a couple of things that could be. I'm also wondering if it's just, in a sense, flushing of soil absorption systems all along the river from all the rain, because when they first wrote the Title V regulations, they took into account the dynamics of average rainfall here. But to have the amount of rain that we've had in a short time could have eventually flushed out and put more materials into the river faster. And the dissolved oxygen level was extraordinarily low, if the reading was correct from the meter that Mass DEP brought and dropped into the river. It was 0.15 milligrams per liter. Anything below 3 is considered hypoxic, not sufficient oxygen level for life. So it might be killing off the things that were living there, and their death and decay is causing the smell. So, and this did happen years past.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen that come from natural organic decomposition.
Yeah.
And it can look pretty alarming. But yeah, I mean, you would definitely, I mean, petroleum is a pretty characteristic iridescent thing
Yep.
with odors. So I think, you know, it makes sense that that's not the likely culprit.
Right. At first, I thought it looked to me similar to some synthetic oils, synthetic lubricants.
And just.
But the smell wasn't quite right, so.
And I did take a picture of the DEP personnel's notebook, and dissolved oxygen, depending on the depth, was anywhere from 1.6 to 2.4. The pH was hovering at 5-foot level, 10-foot level at 6.3. But in respect to combined sewer overflows, that's a very great possibility. And what DEP said when they left us, that they were also going to contact their division that handles sewer treatment plants to work their view into it as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty common when the groundwater table is so high that it could be the CSOs. So it would not surprise me if that's the culprit.
Right. I don't know if we have as many CSOs out here compared to in Boston. That's a huge issue, but there might be. And I think, Mark, you had also mentioned the dynamic of, with this amount of rainfall, if it's getting into combined sewers, the need for discharge of untreated material just because the volume is too much to handle. So.
And I know DEP does allow very temporary opportunities for sewer treatment plants to dump out without treatment if it's already coming out of, say, sewer manholes. They just let them dump into rivers. So that's why DEP was going to check with the other division. We were dealing with the emergency response division. They're going to coordinate and get back to us once they deal. What they need to do is, it appears they're going to need to trace it back even further from the Millis Medfield line on Route 109, because one of our own personnel went down there to look, and he said he saw the same sheen or film as we saw up on Route 27. So that means they got to go further back from there. And there was some discussions on sewer treatment plants that might be on a tributary to the Charles River. So it's going to be interesting to see what they find out on this, but I hope they do it soon, because the odor's horrific, and I have a feeling we'll be getting plenty of calls on this matter. And the Boston News has picked up on this, just so everyone knows.
Yeah, so it's not a happy story, unfortunately. And it was nice. I've seen a lot more otters and beavers down at the river lately. Because I am passing by there with some frequency. So, all right, let's see, we have 1 minute. You know what, we'll just get ready for it, for the next variance hearing. So we have a variance hearing for septic replacement at 38 Meadowbrook Road. And Ellen, do we have the green cards?
Yes.
All right. So I'm just going to get ready with the document. I'll do both. All right.
Dan McIntyre representing the homeowners.
Okay.
This is another challenging site. Similar to 31 Oldfield, this house is not for sale, but the homeowners are experiencing backups and need to have their system replaced. Our soil testing kind of revealed the issue is it's a very high groundwater table in this area. Their existing system and tanks are under the groundwater table. So that's whenever the water table comes up, they're experiencing backup. So it's something that I think we know the cause of it. But there are, in addition to the high groundwater, we have the on-site well, we have an abutters well, we've got an intermittent stream that runs along or through the property. And that really limits, space for the new system. So we are squeezing it in right in the kind of the side backyard, trying to maintain the 50-foot offset to the wetlands, 111-foot off to the existing well, and we're maintaining the required 150-foot offset to the abutters well. The real issue here is raising it up. We are getting up above the groundwater table, but we do have to mound the yard and install a retaining wall to make it all work. But we are asking for a number of Title V and Town of Sherborn waivers, mainly with the groundwater offset.
Okay.
We are using an alternative system, the Elgin system, that's approved for the 2-foot offset.
Mm-hmm.
Because of space constraints, we are using it in a bed configuration, but we are using the pressure dosing because of the mounding that's required. We have gone through conservation; they've approved it, and I think with that we can open up to questions.
Okay. Okay, and here's, yes, so here are some of the constraints. Well offset, another well offset, buffer
Yep.
to the stream.
And the
The
property line
house
is right there.
itself.
The house itself, yeah.
Right, so hence the retaining wall to contain the mound. Yeah, and an aqueduct, so obviously it's
Right.
not a good spot for it either.
And on this particular one, the plumbing is actually it's a split level or raised ranch type configuration that builders use to keep above the high groundwater. All the plumbing is below the slab, so there was no opportunity to raise the plumbing up. So we still have the tanks are going to be in the groundwater table, and we specified some specific design modifications of the tank to make sure they stay watertight.
Mhm. Okay, and was the prior tank not a seamless construction?
It's hard to say. It was back in the 70s when it was installed.
Okay.
Not really sure.
All right. Does anyone have any questions? And are there any abutters present who have questions? Or Mark, any particular observations you'd like to make?
Just that, again, I think Dan explains it very well. When you go for the approval, I do need to talk about the room count. The assessors do show it. I can let you know now if you'd like. The assessors do show it as a 10-room house. Obviously, but a 4-bedroom house at the same time. So Dan has designed according to the assessors as a 4-bedroom. So they're kind of locked in where they really need to know that this is it. They can't add on any rooms. They're already maxed out because they're not supposed to have more than 9 rooms on a 4-bedroom septic. Existing is a 10-room house, but as assessed, it shows only 4 bedrooms. Dan, maybe you can help me here. Are there basement rooms that, do you know why the assessors have determined that it's only a 4-bedroom?
Yeah, well, it is a 4-bedroom house. They use it as a 4-bedroom, and they wanted to design it as a 4-bedroom. They don't quite understand all the room count configurations, but they did finish off out of the lower level. The homeowner here has MS, so she's kind of restricted to the lower level.
Okay.
So they did finish off a room for her down there. And I
Is
think
that all
that's
below?
up there.
Dan, I'm sure there's access through the outside then to that basement area.
Yes, there is.
Do you know if there's another basement room below grade? Because that would make this all work much easier, I would say, with a deed recorded basement room if it's below grade, if there's more than one down in the basement.
Well, there's a walkout right by the garage, there's a door coming out of the basement down
Okay.
further.
Yeah.
Because the foundation wall is really only 4 feet tall. You know, the slab is just 4 feet below grade.
So
'Cause
basically
it's a raised ranch type thing.
okay, so one finished basement and I presume then 6 first floor rooms and 4 second floor rooms. I'm sorry, 5 first floor rooms and 4 second floor rooms.
Let's see, I think there's 2 rooms in the basement. Yeah,
So do you-
I think maybe they included the porch. There's an enclosed porch. I'm not sure how they got to 10 rooms, actually.
I think maybe then the approval should be clear that the room count's already maxed out. And cannot, no additions can be completed unless it comes back to a 9-room, 4-bedroom house. Something like that in the approval, just to note it.
Right. Do we need to see floor plans and maybe have,
Unfortunately, I thought about it now. I should have asked Dan before the hearing. That's
Uh-huh.
my fault. You don't have anything available, do you, Dan? I just have the assessors records. They don't, well,
Yeah,
let me see.
that's all I have.
Yeah, the assessors records are kind of open rooms. I'm looking at it right now and yeah, they're not like a true floor plan like Dan would draw up for us, but
Mhm.
I'm just thinking if the board could deed record one of the basement rooms, if it's below grade, then that would get you to the 9 rooms.
Yeah, I think we should look at it. I'm wondering how we incorporate it this evening in terms of allowing them to move ahead if they're already having trouble
Sure. No, I understand.
with the system.
I would suggest maybe making that a condition of the approval that floor plan be submitted in at the next meeting. I know it's a ways off, at least so they can get started on the system if they need to, is to review that as almost like a building process so they don't get stalled. I'm sure they're anxious to move along. Is that true, Dan? They want to get moving right away on this?
They do.
Yeah.
But at the same time, all the contractors are busy too, so they're having trouble
Yeah, true.
finding somebody. But I can certainly get a floor plan prepared for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I would say that, and maybe at the next meeting, we review that for determination. But in this determination, I still would recommend approval. I don't want to tie up the applicant, but with
Right.
the approval, it should note that the 10 rooms max out the room count and possible deed recording may be needed to bring it to 9 to meet
Right.
code.
Right. And I would like to just get that cleaned up rather
Yeah.
than leaving it to some future date.
Yeah, no, it makes
Make
sense.
things simpler in the future, I would think.
No, I agree.
Okay. All right, so let's go to the variance requests, which are, okay. All right. So if there are no other questions, but of course they can always be raised during this section. Do we have a motion to grant a variance to 8.01?
Move.
Second,
Any other comments? Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay, do we have a motion to grant a variance to 8.02?
So move. Oh. Second,
Other comments? Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Are you on mute, Rebecca?
No, I said Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Oh, good, okay.
Matt Vitale, aye.
All right, and then the next 3 have to do with distances to various things. So do we have a motion to grant a variance to 10.1B?
So moved.
Seconded.
Comments? Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Do we have a motion to grant a variance to 10.2?
So moved.
Second,
And this is the wetland offset, again, already reviewed and approved by Concom. Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay, next one, do we have a motion to grant a variance to 10.2?
So moved.
Second.
And just quickly, so which property line was that?
It's the
Left,
one-
right, top,
It's the
bottom?
one across the, with the aqueduct.
Oh, okay, yep, that makes sense. All right. Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Matt Vitale, aye.
All right, and do we have these are the local upgrade, so for Title V. Do we have a motion to grant a variance to 15.4051B?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, and just so the tanks are going back in at the same levels, or the tank is going back in at the same level as the prior, or?
Yes, we have to tie into the same plumbing, so it's going to be down at the same elevation below grade.
Okay,
And what'll happen, Daryl, is they will have to put, if you don't mind, Dan, I just want to interject a couple items. They need to put in, and Dan does show it, rises to grade, so they have access to the tank. The tank will be 3.8 feet below grade versus the required 3. And this, as Dan notes, prevents some major plumbing needs. And secondly, it is a pump system, so in no way is it going to affect the environmental concern that the tank, that the effluent isn't being properly treated. So this is only for the septic tank, but it will then reach the pump chamber, and it will be pumped up to the level it needs to go to allow for the proper effluent treatment.
okay, and then per the McIntyre amendment, it'll be a nice rugged tank that shouldn't permit anything to leak in. All right, so Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Do we have a motion to grant a variance to 15.4051H?
So moved.
Seconded.
Comments? Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Matt Vitale, aye.
And lastly, do we have a motion to grant a variance to 15.4051J?
So moved.
Seconded.
Comments? Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay, so we'll close the hearing, and the plans are ready for approval. Mark?
Yes, they are, Daryl. I don't know how we want to handle conditional to deed recordings for the garbage grinder prohibition and the innovative alternative technology. They're using Algin technology here. And the other note I wanted to make was the room count. I think there should be some notice here that the room count still will need to be rectified at the next meeting, maybe.
Yeah, to determine whether a third deed recording might be required.
Correct. Yes.
Clean this up.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And does that sound manageable to you, Dan?
Yes.
Okay. So do we have that motion?
More
That is-
effective if unmuted. So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Any other comments? Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Matt Vitale, aye.
All right. Thank you,
Just
Dan.
just a note on that, since you got a couple of minutes. I'm just looking at the plan a little more carefully. We did design it for 4 bedrooms and noted there's 10 rooms. But in the design statement, we did show that it's actually large enough for a 5-bedroom using the alternative technology. If you see that on the plan, Mark, on the soil absorption sizing calculations, we did note that it
I'm
could be
looking at it, Dan.
a
Yeah,
5-bedroom.
so you show the 4, you're using a bed and you're showing that you have, let's see, you're taking the, let's see, I see, so construct, because you can't do new construction, I see how you went around this, no, but check design based. So yeah, theoretically, yeah, I see what you had to do. You had to work around the new construction part of it. And by doing that, you incorporated 5, but maybe explain it just a little bit better to me. I see your 5 bedrooms in the third box down at the end.
Yeah, so the system is technically large enough for 5 bedrooms, but we're still calling it 4 bedrooms because that's really what it is.
And so, Dan, it sounds like as a board, we're calling it a 4-bedroom system. You're calling it a 4-bedroom system, but noting that it is a very robustly designed one.
Yes.
And I would say, like, given that it's like one step from being a submarine, I think that makes me happy.
Yeah, I don't feel real comfortable calling it a 5-bedroom or telling future homeowners that it's a 5-bedroom, given the real constraints of the property.
That makes a lot of sense.
So maybe then, if I may, if it sells, I can see someone coming in saying, I want my 5th bedroom. So maybe the board needs to change the condition of a deed recording to just note that the house with this present septic system, which is a bed, we prefer not to utilize beds, is only considered for a 4-bedroom and no future bedroom can be allowed, something like that. Just so whoever buys this has a true understanding.
I guess I totally agree with the rationale, Mark. I feel like we often don't do that. And in that case, I would expect a homeowner or somebody else to go back and say, what did you put in for? And what was installed was a 4-bedroom system. And I think that if, sort of a future engineer came and said, hey, we overbuilt the system, can we call it a 5 now? What we've historically said is no, it's a 4 unless there's some circumstance different. Am I remembering that right?
I would say so with the waivers that you granted. I would say you got solid ground because you granted waivers for a bed and so forth, where we don't usually allow beds. So, although this is pressure dosed, but I'm just trying to make sure there's no way for someone to find a way to a 5th bedroom if indeed it's
because you certainly wouldn't want to say you're a 10-bedroom house and now you can go to 11 because I've got a 5-bedroom system. For a system that I think is well designed for, like, this feels like a 95th percentile plus challenging site, particularly as it relates to groundwater. You'd hate to see more flow going into that system. And so, from my standpoint, if we need to do it to clearly communicate it, I'm open to it, but it feels different than what we normally do. How are others reacting?
So I could see where, right in this comment, actually, let me make that bigger, so it is tiny. Where I could imagine someone in the future might get sidetracked by this right here. But I'm also anticipating that Ellen's notes will include information about that this was more of a double check on things than a suggestion that it should be a 5-bedroom.
And just to add on to that, it may fit the size requirements for a 5-bedroom, but given that we're asking for Title V local upgrade waivers, we wouldn't get the additional bedroom.
Yeah.
DEP is not as nice as the Sherborn Board of Health, where they give you the +1.
That is correct.
You may be the only person who's ever said that.
No, but in fact, that sentence above % reduction, you are getting a reduction of this system. So indeed, I think that solves anyone coming in that you can't increase it even though it's designed for 5. It's a 5 with that reduction.
I do have a note on the folder saying that no increase in design flow is allowed. So,
Okay.
Yeah, so I think the granting of the local upgrade waivers really prohibits new construction. So I don't think you need to do a deed recording on the bedroom count.
Could it, but I'm wondering, Dan, it's just, I just see it, I just ran into this today with a lady on North Main Street where she bought a house. It got marketed as a 4-bedroom, even though it's only a 3-bedroom. It concerns me that there's no room for, even though the Title V showed it as a 3-bedroom, they still marketed it as a 4. Maybe within one of those 2 deed recordings, it could state, maybe the garbage grinder one, that this is only for and can't not exceed 4 bedrooms and or 10 rooms. Something just to note it on the deed recording, just so, even as you noted, maybe, just so it's there. So, because I asked the question, it was right on the Title V for that other situation I'm talking about. I said, how did they miss it on the Title V inspection? They said, well, a real estate person accidentally saw an assessment record, which Ellen, I left you a note on that one. So we need to upgrade that. Any little chance for error could create an issue with the new homeowner if anyone buys it. So I don't think it would hurt to just add maybe a statement to one of those 2 deed recordings that this is only, maybe the garbage grinder one, that this is only for a 4-bedroom house that cannot exceed 10 rooms.
wouldn't that just be a 3rd deed recording?
Or a 3rd one. I don't know if this, I'm trying to save costs, but I don't know if there's a cost to do a 3rd, but I think somehow, some way it should be noted on the deed recording. So it just tightens it up a little bit, because if there's sometimes there's confusion out there is all I'm going to say.
Mm-hmm. I could see if it turns out that we look at the floor plans and see a need for a deed recording about the rooms, that would be an excellent time to also address this and say, shall not exceed.
Yeah, that would be
4 bedrooms and X number of rooms, and room Q shall not be used as blah, blah, blah. So that might be a nice time to capture it and group those things together.
I agree with that. Yeah.
And then I guess the one other thing, maybe on the, tell me if this is reasonable, Dan and Mark, on this comment about the waiver request does not allow new construction. So for the as-built plans, should this be clarified with local upgrade approval waiver requests do not allow?
Yeah, we could mark that up on the as-built.
Okay, just because people are going to know that waivers were granted.
And
I don't know.
The Board of Health can't, once they grant a waiver, or by granting that waiver, they're basically saying they can't have new construction.
Right.
Under Title V.
And maybe, Dan, and maybe it's just clarifying that sentence right there, because it does have that word 5-bedroom in it, but maybe waiver request does not allow new construction. So houses to remain a 4-bedroom with no more than 10 rooms, maybe something like that, and just wipe out the 5-bedroom part.
Yeah.
I just can see it being picked up accidentally and confusing. And then I'm dealing with a new homeowner that may be very upset, as I'm dealing right now with, not for this property.
Yeah, we did something similar over at 92 Lake Street, I think, didn't we?
Yes, you did. Yeah, because of the age of the system. So
okay.
I would still ask the board to approve the plan, maybe with some verbiage changed on here, and then we can come back to the floor plan at another meeting.
Okay, so I can't remember now where we left off. Did we have a motion already on approving the plan and then deed recording?
Yeah, did.
Okay.
Conditional to the 2 deed recordings, and that the count needs to be rectified to determine if a 3rd deed recording is needed.
Yeah.
Okay. There was a motion, a second, and you did vote it.
Okay, that's what I thought. All right, so. Okay.
Thank you, Dan, for bringing that to the attention, because that helps.
All right, shall we move on to the 30 North Main Street?
Yeah, that Dan's here for that.
Dan, is that okay?
Yes, and I believe Steve Constantine, the homeowner, is on the line as well.
All right. I'm not sure which of the documents to open up first, or if you want me
Well,
to stop
Darrell, if
sharing
I-
and you do it.
If I may, Darrell, I think as the best she could, Claire Golden, and thank you, Dan, for sharing the document, gave us what we need, kind of a map to follow with some various options. So maybe looking over that email from Claire, there it is right there. And
Well, if we could
especially
start with maybe the locust plan, so you,
Oh,
the
okay, yeah,
board can get a sense of the properties.
sure. And that last sentence was a good sentence to look. But go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead, Dan.
So, yeah, here's the property. North Main Street's on the left-hand side. I think right across the street is the Heritage Restaurant, or approximately right across the street.
That is correct.
Over on the right-hand side is the fields for the school. So Mr. Constantine owns 34 North Main Street, and he lives there. It's served by a well and 2 cesspools, and he's got an acre of land. A few years back, he purchased 30 North Main from Elliott Taylor, and that's on a 1/4 acre with a well and a cesspool essentially right next to each other. So the thought was, Steve wants to fix up the Taylor house and rent it. So the thought was that we could take a portion of his 1 acre land and put a septic system out back where we could meet all the well setbacks to serve number 30. And then we also investigated that backland enough so we also leave room to put in a septic system in the future for number 34 and meet all the well setbacks. The issue we ran into is the nitrogen loading. Under Title V, we need to have at least 10,000 square feet of lot area per bedroom to dilute the nitrogen. So a 4-bedroom house needs to have an acre of land. A 3-bedroom house needs to be on 3/4 acres of land, and so on. So currently, number 34 is in compliance with nitrogen loading. Number 30 is not. And by taking some of the backland of 34 and giving it to 30, we take 34 out of compliance, but we improve the situation at number 30. So that's kind of the conundrum we're in. I mean, the soils and the groundwater are all very conducive to septic systems. We can fit, 2 septic systems in the back there and meet all the requirements with the exception of nitrogen loading. We're not asking for any new construction here. And although we look at nitrogen loading in every case, we're required to do that. If we're not proposing any new construction, it's kind of up to the discretion of the Board of Health whether they would require nitrogen enhancing technologies. And as far as I'm aware, I don't think there may be some in Sherborn. I'm not aware of any, at least in this downtown area. Where
I recall that there was one, Mark, maybe you remember, and I forget what the name of the lane is. Down a bit across the railroad tracks and turn right.
Unity Lane?
No, before.
Linden?
Yeah, I think it might be that one. It's just after Unity Lane.
Yeah,
I thought there was one right there on the corner.
there could be. I know you know, we've been challenged on these smaller lots, and it could be right there.
Yeah, we installed right in the corner of North Main and Zion, right near Linden. We did that one and we installed a fast system,
Okay, yeah.
but that was because of the high groundwater and we didn't have any other alternative at the time, but that wasn't considered a nitrogen reducing technology. At least at the time. I think it might be approved by now, but at the time it wasn't.
Well, and years ago, right near that area, I know we have a very specialized septic system that, due to the perk rate, I think it was over a 90, we had to put back then they used to put septic tanks at not too many, but the state allowed it, at the end of the leaching field. But that was more of a situation on how it functioned, not truly nitrogen loading.
And can you guys walk, sorry, I know Ellen and Ford is the chain where there's sort of not being in compliance wasn't one of the options, but it sounded like Claire had a strategy that she suggested. Can you guys just walk us through that? Like it used words like condoize, which is not totally clear to me what that means.
What that means is basically we take the two separate lots and make it a condo. So it would be served by one large septic system instead of, you know, a separate 3-bedroom for number 30 and a separate 4-bedroom for number 34. We would have a single 7-bedroom system back there, and then would have some sort of, you know, a condo agreement or maintenance agreement between the two properties that they have to, you know, maintain the system and service the system because it's a joint leach field.
And I view that as a way to avoid fights down the line if you're using someone else's property.
So that gets us around, you know, the Title V issue about taking a lot that's in compliance and taking some land for it so it's not in compliance anymore. It gets us around that. But from a practical purpose, it does absolutely nothing for the nitrogen loading. We're still going to have 770 gallons of effluent going into the ground over that 1.25 acres, whether it's a single 7-bedroom system or two separate systems. It's just a way to get around the regulation.
Yeah, I thought of it as in addition to maybe nitrogen, like they're not mutually exclusive, right? It's just another measure to take to hopefully make it function smoothly in the future.
Yeah, the other option that's available is to put in a system for number 30 on the land of number 34 with a condition that when 34 does upgrade its system, it could put in a nitrogen enhancing system to get back into compliance. That's another option.
I believe with the nitrogen reduction system, you get 1 bedroom out of that.
Well, but they're so far out of meeting the 440 gallons per acre that
So
I don't think they're going to get there too easily.
No, and so what we're looking at is 1.25 acres. And so if that's the case, that would allow for 5 bedrooms. And if you're looking at 7, you're basically looking at 2 nitrogen reduction systems if you needed 7 bedrooms. Or as Dan said, the state has another way around it, and that's to condoize the area. And the one thing I can let everyone know is I have a neighbor that's looking for property, not, I don't know, in Sherborn, but he says it's very difficult to find a separate home for an in-law. I know this house is bigger than an in-law, but just food for thought, because there's not many properties that have 2 houses on them where one could be used for in-laws. It's just, and I guess they're very hard to find according to my neighbor who's looking right now.
But
mean,
that,
that's
that
the one
really
thing that-
changes the whole, the whole concept of that. I mean, it's, in the future, it would have to be, I don't know how that would work in the future, but
All right,
I think Claire's last sentence kind of helps to some degree. She kind of summarizes everything a little bit where she says essentially.
so well, I guess the question is, what's the board's feeling about, the nitrogen loading in this area?
Yeah, it's not good downtown. Across the street and down a little bit, they had total nitrogen levels at the high nines, 9 point something in water in the PWS during routine testing not long ago. And they're generally elevated downtown. I have mixed feelings about them. I think the nitrogen issue is serious enough down there that it would probably be wise to have something. I don't like them when people think that because you have nitrogen reduction, somehow you've magically reduced all of the problematic constituents of septic systems, which is not the case. But here it is bad downtown.
We did submit testing for number 30.
Mm-hmm.
When Steve bought the house, he had the well tested, and nitrogen wasn't high at that particular well.
Although, how long had it been?
What year was that? Oh, it was 2017.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot. It's only gotten worse with time. So I guess I'm confused. So what are the options vis-a-vis what DEP was saying, what Claire was saying, like to quote condoize the two lots and essentially kind of combine the areas, but have separate facilities, for the units? Like, I guess, can we scroll down maybe a little bit?
Yep.
Yeah, thanks. To each septic to me,
That was kind of it.
660 gallons per day. So is that saying like treat it as like combine the lots but have two septics? Is that what she's saying?
No, I think it's having a shared septic system.
For the two lots together.
Right. So there'd still be two separate properties.
Yep.
But they would be combined into a condominium association.
So how would this compare to some of the situations we've had recently where we've had compounds where it's been maybe a single owner with multiple, there's like the barn that they converted.
Street.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm thinking of. So can we kind of compare and contrast with that situation?
I mean, so it seems like it's similar to Bullard in that it is multiple households using a common system. It sounds like that is different than the pattern Steve is hoping for in terms of kind of having, potential either future conflict and then also maintaining these properties coupled, which may not be the long-term goal for either Stephen or a future property owner. Whereas I think, they're sort of baked into Bullard that will always be transferred as a campus.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it does seem problematic though to conceive of them as separate facilities because they won't be in compliance. And down the road, if other, if distinct entities buy each of these properties, then it's compounding the problem.
Well, or even like if you picture Stephen's position, if we let's say that we go through this and Stephen says, boy, what I'm left with is a pretty unappealing thing. I'd like to sell my property. And then we say, well, okay, then there's a Sherborn regulation that says, the buyer has to get a new system because the cesspool is out of compliance. then you'd be left with that quarter-acre parcel to say, how am I going to get a 3-bedroom system on a quarter acre? And so, it feels like it's sort of a tenuous position to be in.
So we've had a few others, I think, in town, and Mark and Ellen, maybe you can help remember. I think there was something on Woodland where one house got an easement onto a neighbor's property to put a system. It might have been near somewhere kind of close to where Goulding meets up with Woodland.
That is correct, Errol. That was.
Okay,
the
so
new
I don't know
house.
how that worked out. And then, and the land wasn't as constrained. I think the neighbor had a fair amount. And I think it's because they just didn't have the right conditions on their property for something, or appropriate conditions. And then
And
another
we-
one was, oh no, the other ones were near the corner of Lake and Farm. But what they did was all rat tails, so that each house still owned, all the septics were put in one area in the center of about 4 houses, but they still owned the land that carried the lines leading to the SASs.
That is correct. That's at the corner of Farm and Lake going.
So have they considered that for this to actually?
Well, they met nitrogen loading requirements for the amount of acres they had for each
Yeah.
lot. They just found.
That was our
Yeah.
initial thought was to do an easement to put a septic in for number 30, but we ran into the nitrogen. We're taking number 34 out of compliance when we do that.
That is correct.
And if you put in an independent system for each property, both of which had nitrogen reduction, I'm not saying that's a desired solution, but would that be compliant with what Claire described for you guys?
I think so.
Because my understanding with the problem with the property transfer was that you can't pull something out of compliance. But if you had a position where each of them had a system that was in compliance and 34 remained in compliance even post-transfer, that would let the properties remain distinct from a sort of future ownership shared system standpoint, and the possibility that they may be bifurcated later. I'd say from a Board of Health standpoint, the part that's appealing to me is replacing cesspools downtown, or something I'd be generally enthusiastic about. And so, there's a benefit to 34, even though the work is going on at 30. Is that something you talked about or considered, or is that something we should think about as on the table right now?
I'd like to consider that. I mean, I'm not a big fan of shared systems. I like each facility to have their own septic system, so there's no argument. If there is a failure, there's going to be finger pointing of who flushed what down the toilet, I'm sure. So it's
No,
better to have
and that's a
two
good
separate
point, Dan.
systems.
And that is a real valid point, Dan. That has happened in, say, 3 complexes where I know in Wayland one failed within a year, and they all pointing to each other. Here's a question, and I'd have to check with the state unless you know, Dan. If you were to take 0.25 acres from 32, 34 and add it to 30, and so that way 30 has a half an acre and go up to 3 bedrooms with a nitrogen reduction system, that would allow 32, 34 to have, it now has 0.75 acres. And again, that would mean 3 bedrooms, but with nitrogen reduction possibly could have 4 bedrooms. And that would allow for septic systems on both properties to be separately owned. I was thinking about Leland Farms. They, the other way around is they bought property across the railroad tracks so they could meet nitrogen loading requirements. Again, I'm thinking outside the box, but I was going.
I think that the numbers could work if we could get, we need at least 20,000 square feet and a nitrogen enhancing system to get a 3-bedroom for number 30. And that would leave, we need at least 30,000 square feet plus a nitrogen enhancing system to get a 4-bedroom for number 34.
Yeah, and that's where that 0.25 comes from.
Right, the 0.25 is about 10,000 square feet. So we'd need to get a 10,000 square foot either subdivision or easement to get us up to 20,000 square feet plus a nitrogen enhancing system to get us up to a 3-bedroom.
I think that 0.25 acres with nitrogen reduction may work, but it's just thinking outside the box, maybe
Yeah.
back to the drawing board with it. And that would get you 2 separate systems owned by 2 separate people without any issue of one person damaging the entire leaching field.
Right.
And Dan, am I right in recalling that both properties are currently served by cesspools at baseline?
They are.
And so I think that's the other part in terms of, I think what we're thinking about here is really thinking about how do we bring properties into compliance. And so I think that while we're thinking outside the box, I think the net effect of that is moving from a state of poorer quality treatment to better quality treatment. And that's a great time to be thinking outside the box, because I feel pretty confident that sort of what we'd be landing on afterwards, even if it requires some creative thinking, as long as it's compliant with what the state is describing, we're going to be better positioned than the existing cesspools.
I agree with that. And just back on Mark's point again on the 1/4 acre lot, I think the issue then becomes the well separation. We really want to put the system back in there to get some sort of separation from that well. So we're into an easement situation regardless, just to get a well offset.
So do you think they're amenable to also tackling replacement of these cesspools?
Steve, can we ask you that question?
I think that is part of the issue, is how they can sequence this and still make it affordable.
Mhm.
They're going to be expensive systems, and it's hard to tackle both systems at once.
Okay.
Could we have a conditional? Is there any kind of time sequencing that we could do? Because I think it would be hard to be in compliant with what the state has told us if we don't have some clear pathway. But I could imagine a scenario where we could say, here's a defined time period and must be completed within 2 years, or some defined cycle threshold that we still are moving towards compliance, but we could say, we've got a hard stop for this, but also allows the homeowner to sort of not outlay all that simultaneously. I don't remember us doing that, but I feel like it's got some risk with it, because Mr. Constantine could sell and then we couldn't enforce on the next homeowner. We ran into that previously with the wells that were with a weird division of property lines, and the next homeowner wasn't doing the right thing. So I'm not totally comfortable with that, but would love to think creatively, because I'd love to replace cesspools with septic systems, especially with the density downtown.
Right, especially with these kind of separations now. The tough part is we don't have a lot of tools for enforcement other than when someone wants to do the next step of something new on their property. That's when things get cleaned up and taken care of before proceeding. So in the absence of that, just saying, okay, at this 2-year period or whatever time frame it is, now it's time to replace the other one. We don't have leverage.
Well, given that all cesspools are failure, if they sold one or the other that wasn't upgraded, he would be forced to do that before he sold.
Right. But if this one gets taken care of and this one gets sold, then that still leaves this.
Right.
So, I mean, oh boy.
Again, not trying to put you on the spot too much, Dan, but did you guys, if we went down this road, did you have a temporal spacing in mind in terms of when that might be, when resolution might be completed?
Steve, do you have any thoughts on timing?
At this point, no, I'm just trying to look at some of the options. I mean, what I'd like to do is try to get this button down, hopefully by the end of the summer, early fall, so I can get the work started, and then also over the winter get work done to the house as well. That's just kind of rough timing is what I'm looking at.
And Steve, if we ended up saying the only way we can kind of get to this is if we create a system that does not put either property out of compliance, which would require installing a system both for 30, which is the initial intent, and for 34 at the same time, that's sort of a package deal. Because I think that what we're trying to address is that Claire basically said, we can't take 34 out of compliance. And so that limits what we can do for transfer with 30 when 34 doesn't have some in place nitrogen mitigation. Does that make sense?
No, I understand. I understand what you're trying to do. It's just financially, it would be a hardship.
Right, and being able to rent this out and a revenue generating stream would help.
Well, hang on a second. The rental is actually, the plan is, and again, let me talk a little bit. So that area behind Elliot's house, okay, the 1.0 acres,
Yep.
my son has a small orchard in the garden. And he lives in Watertown with his wife and my grandson. And what they would like, he's out here every weekend working. And what he would like to do is he would like to rent it. So in other words, he would like to move into 30 once it's complete. And he's a BS graduate. And he knows the town pretty well. But that's kind of what the plan is. That's where we're looking to go. But who knows how long that would go on for as well. That's something he'd like to do. But as he moves along in his career and things, he might want to move somewhere else. And then you're right, then it would become a rental.
And so I guess and maybe if we can just take a straw, because I want to be cognizant of the time, and it feels like this is a sort of thorny issue we could keep chewing on. My personal gut check is I think we're stuck with Claire's guidance. It says we can't bring one out of compliance. And I can't see a way to get around that without simultaneously addressing the fact that the nitrogen load across the property at baseline is the challenge we have. And so it feels like we have to do two systems. I'm open to having a defined space of a year or something just to be able to space it out a little bit. I'm deeply ambivalent about it. I'm like 51-49 because I just worry about slippery slopes for other properties, but also recognize, that we have a little bit of a specific situation here where there is no property may be transferred and we're not having new construction and increase in flow. So if Mr. Constantine keeps the properties for 20 years and we've replaced the cesspool at 1, and he didn't do it, he said he would do it. Not that I mean to imply that, Steve, but if it did happen, we would still be in a better compliance position than we are today and would have the property transfer as a definitive endpoint that would say, 34 still couldn't be sold without a septic system as part of that transaction. And that feels somewhat specific to this scenario, but also one that if it came up elsewhere, I could live with continuing ambivalence. Where are others at? Just to kind of check in.
I'm on the same wavelength as you are. Unfortunately, Mr. Constantine, because this is actually protect your health and your grandchildren, because it's young children and pregnant women and elderly people who are susceptible to nitrogen loading complications. And there are some serious medical conditions that are associated with elevated nitrogen in your drinking water, unfortunately.
So just to ask a question on the whole nitrogen loading thing. I know we're talking about it, but is there some kind of testing that needs to take place to see if it's actually there? How do we know it's there?
So I think that for us, in some ways, we don't have to know that it's there because the state has said this is what the rule is. And so it's a property per unit. I think it would also be hard if you say, well, it's not there right now, but that house has been unoccupied for 4 years. Then you don't have the feces and the other things that are generating nitrogen generating them. So if you did a test today and didn't see nitrogen, it wouldn't mean that wouldn't be a nitrogen generating system when in use. And I'll defer to Lisa and Daryl. I'm moderately confident in that, but I'm well out of my wheelhouse.
I mean, I think that's reasonable. I mean, obviously usage and occupancy are a key factor in understanding what like a typical load would be, or if that occupancy was at the number of, you know, rooms and bedrooms that exist in that residence. So like, that's what we have to think about, is not what's there just right now, but what could be there, what, you know, how many people could be existing in that, what kind of, you know, load could precipitate from that scenario. So now is a snapshot, and I'm not saying that's not valid information, it is, but that's not necessarily indicative of, you know, the next person or when you sell it or the next occupant. So I think we always have to be mindful of that what's next sort of scenario.
And could that be mitigated using a deed restriction with a number of bedrooms? Well, I think right now it's a 3-bedroom home. So if we keep it as a 3-bedroom home, is that?
I think the issue is that even in a 3-bedroom home with the current lot size, you'd be over the limits for nitrogen loading. So we're stuck trying to do something.
Yeah, I mean, the typical scenario, I think, Steve, you know, on like a single home on a, you know, compliant lot size of, you know, typically 1 to 2 acres in our town. I think that is something that we have entertained in the past, but I think it is problematic that this lot, you know, that adjoining lot size is so much, you know, it's not compliant with what our typical, you know, lot size is that's the issue. So if it was a compliant lot size, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. It is because it's a 1/4 acre in an area that's already, you know, densely overstressed by nitrogen loading in that, you know, whole downtown area. So I think that's that's the issue here.
I guess, again, just trying to think so that kind of Steve and Dan have whatever outside the box ideas there are. Dan and Mark, again, not trying to push this, I have no agenda, but just trying to think of what's a totality of stuff that could be considered. If there was a decrease in the bedroom count at 34 through consolidation of rooms or whatever, it would have, because I don't think we can get below a 3-bedroom minimum for a house in terms of how we typically treat houses and how Title V does. But if we could get the 34 from 4 bedrooms to 3 bedrooms, is that difference enough to get it into nitrogen compliance if we did an easement from 32, 34 to 30?
Yeah, as long as
I can just say go ahead, Dan. Go ahead, Dan.
as long as the easement wasn't more than 10,000 square feet, we could have a 3-bedroom on the remaining 30,000 square feet and be in compliance.
So again, recognizing that may not be appealing, I just want to try to give you everything you can to sort of think about what you want to do next, Steve. And so the basic idea there is just how do we get kind of around the nitrogen calculation in a way that is consistent with, or not, how do we get around it? How do we address it in a way that's compliant with the state? You know, again, I think what yeah, I think it's tough. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
Matt.
Oh, the other option is if these two properties weren't owned by the same person, the person at 30 that just had the 1/4 acre would likely be looking at a tight tank.
Yeah.
Which is really unfortunate. We've had to do that actually at a property on the end of Weston Ave at the Framingham line. And it's unfortunate because it does cause for additional cost in pumping. Also, just point of information, we do have a house that is a 2-bedroom that was designed with the septic system at the corner of Maple and Green Lane. I guess it used to be a Legion Hall at one time. So we have seen 2-bedroom homes as well. So I think, Matt, you're thinking out of the box is not a bad idea, even as it relates to what we're discussing now, and that's room reduction.
And so it sounds like in terms of what I've heard enthusiasm from the board for, room reduction reduces the nitrogen calculation, I think, to the point I think Rebecca's made at previous meetings. The goal here is really to make sure that we've got systems that are performing well and that are sort of able to process the load that they face. And so, again, part of what makes that feel comfortable is that compared to current state, you're moving towards compliance, and the property transfer kind of gives some backstop. I think, at least from my standpoint, the most preferred strategy is either doing simultaneous or closely linked two systems, both of which have nitrogen reduction, that then bring it into compliance with an easement and an easement for 30 to get a chunk of 32, 34. I haven't heard anything, but may have missed it, in terms of other strategies. And it doesn't sound like anybody, most importantly, the property owner, is sort of bullish about a campus system like we had on Bullard, or something that sort of ties those, whether it's in a condo association structure or a campus structure. It sounds like those are sort of off the table right now.
And there may be zoning implications on that. You know, Bullard was already one lot.
Yeah. And
so
again, I think it constrains Mr. Constantine the most, it seems like, in terms of future property transfers, because again, a future homeowner couldn't undo that. Like that is a different structure now.
Just a thought on the reducing 34 to a 3-bedroom. Could that be an interim measure? And then when it's economically feasible to put in a system, could he go back to 4 bedrooms by putting in a nitrogen reducing system?
And going to a 4-bedroom system?
To go back to a 4-bedroom system.
So we're sort of then saying, for the life of this house, it is a 4-bedroom. We have a temporary period where the nitrogen reduction strategy is a change of the footprint in that house, so it is a 3-bedroom house. When we then do the septic, we could then reverse those changes. Is that sort of what you're saying, Dan?
Yeah, he'd have to put in a nitrogen reducing system because it'd still have the 30,000 square feet to work with. But with that, he could go back to 4 bedrooms.
I think we'd have to see a real change rather than just a paper change. And I don't know.
Right.
I don't know what the house looks like and how easy that would be. Knock down a wall for some period of time. I don't know.
Dan, are there implications if you guys end up needing a Title V variance for, like, if we do a 3-bedroom now as part of this strategy, is there any risk that you would run into with Title V if we had a Title V variance that we wouldn't be able to get a +1 from 3?
Mm-hmm.
No, we've actually designed the system already, and
we can get there.
It meets Title V.
Okay.
It meets all of the Sherborn regulations except for the that one where the septic tank has to be within 50 feet of the house.
I've got my own reactions, but we all know I'm pretty good at talking a lot. So what do others think?
If we do that, I just wondering if we can get back to 4 bedrooms when it's economically feasible to put in a nitrogen system.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my standpoint, I am dubious, but I think it kind of squeaks through, because I think that, again, there's a series of checkpoints that we have there. And I think ultimately the goal I have is to make sure that we have a nitrogen loading compliance system throughout the life cycle. I think it's tough to say this is what we'll approve in the future without having that plan. So I can't say this is a future guarantee kind of blank check, but I think conceptually the idea that we are reducing the bedroom count right now through this active construction, and to Daryl's point, it needs to be a sort of substantive change, but I think that just needs to be consistent with what we've asked of other property owners, recognizing that the long-term vision of this home is to be a 4-bedroom home, and that's its current status. And at that point, we sort of transition to a different nitrogen reduction strategy, which is then the SAS based instead of the room count based.
Right. Okay.
Does that, I mean, that's Matt Vitale's opinion. What do others think?
I concur with that logic.
I mean, I think we're going to have to put something on the deed if we're going to do something like this, because what if something goes wrong and, you know,
God forbid
then
Steve
you
gets hit by lightning.
selling the property and everything changes and nobody knows what happened tonight.
Yeah. So maybe it still feels like there's stuff for Steve and Dan to think about. So I probably think some of this needs to come back to Mark, and to, I think Lisa's point in the chat, we also just need to get to the food inspection and other parts. So I think there's been some sort of stuff to mull. Are there other questions that Dan or Steve have in terms of the thinking of the board to kind of then come back and say, this is what we'd like to do?
Just wanted to ask about your comment on the, you could put in systems, I'm presuming back here someplace, that would be compliant at least with Title V in terms of that question about, could you add back the bedroom if there's a way to reduce a bedroom from there? Is that based on actual testing here or information, say, from this system?
No, we actually did some soil testing this spring.
Oh, okay.
Throughout that whole back area, and we can support 2 separate septic systems there.
Okay. Yeah, there is no easy thing, so I guess I would want to hear back on what things sound like possible paths that would work for you. Now that I don't know if you've already thought about all of these before, or it's worth you and the homeowner contemplating a little bit more about.
Yeah, we'll talk some more. We hadn't thought of what Matt suggested, so I think that's a good one for us to think about.
And then I liked Rebecca's idea about, whatever we might do, we're going to have to pretty carefully lay out what that potential pathway might be, if it's meant to be a series of steps that we could figure out how to do so that they're
And I feel
robust and legal all along the way.
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. I think it's important that you understand that we're not trying to be difficult. It's not your fault. It's bad luck. This part of town has the problem because of the geographic makeup of Sherborn, and it just doesn't drain in the same way as it does in other places, and so there's high groundwater, and the consequences, the nitrogen loading is elevated in all the properties. But the problem is there are very serious and life-threatening medical conditions that can result from it. So our responsibility, which is an unfortunate situation, is that we have to be, we have to just make sure that everybody is safe.
And I think I would say I totally agree with that in terms of the framework, Rebecca. I think what I'd also just say for Mr. Constantine is, I think everything we're talking about is moving towards safety. It's just, hoping to highlight, we're not solely trying to make life difficult. It's a side effect sometimes of needing to keep people safe. But I think it does seem like there's a way to get through this that hopefully makes it economically manageable while also moving towards compliance, because every single option we're talking about is better than baseline. And probably the baseline for 200 years. So we're making progress. So Dan, you guys will reconvene and kind of think through some of the options, and then we'll kind of come back to the board to kind of work through a series of steps just to make sure we're all kind of have a shared understanding of this is step 1, this is step 2, this is step 3. Does that sound like the right next step?
It does.
Okay.
And I guess I should weigh in a little bit more and say, I like the idea of, if it was possible to reduce the room count over here so that 3/4 of an acre would suffice, allowing this to then use that to come into compliance with nitrogen reducing. It just seems to be maybe a reasonable sequence of steps, and not lock the property owner into the condoizing approach or a merging completely of the 2 properties and then a larger system all at once. But I don't want to put those words into your head. Or...
No, I think it seems like a reasonable solution. We'll think it through and see if we can find any downsides. But yeah, I think the next step, as Matt said, Steve and I can talk, and we can talk to Mark, and then we can come back to the board with a more firm proposal.
Mhm. Okay. Sounds good. So maybe we can and close out that and come back to it. And I think we have our food inspector who's been food and camp inspector waiting to fill us in on things. Is that correct? Is Tom still hanging in there?
Yes, I'm here. Hello, everybody.
Hi. I don't know which of the, I think it's two issues you want to do first, the heritage or the soccer camp.
Sure, I'll start with the heritage. I had a re-inspection that I conducted over there last Tuesday. Things seemed to turn around significantly. Met with Josh. They had some time to do some deep cleaning and get things in order over there and follow the recommendations of the pest control report. Ended up granting him a repair extension to finalize regrouting and sealing around some of the floor drains in the kitchen to prevent any further leaking, and then also to install the new dishwasher that he does have on site. So I have a follow-up visit scheduled for September 13th. So hopefully by then, everything should be completed.
Okay, yeah, I was pleased to see the report and that it looked a lot better than the last couple of reports.
Agreed.
For
Okay,
sure.
so I guess we'll ask you to, keep on top of that, as I know you will.
Oh, most definitely. And Josh is very receptive, and we have a good working relationship. So things should look much improved moving forward. Let's hope.
Okay, good.
And Tom, just a big thank you. I know this has been a lot of time and work and a lot to do on your end, and we really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah. Right. This is a nice short list. All right. Is the board okay with this? Any other questions for Tom on heritage? I'll take that as a no. All right, so you can tell us about how the soccer camp is going. I don't know if the materials came through today that were suggested by them.
Yeah, I'm still reviewing some documents that they had submitted. Is the operator here tonight by any chance, or?
No, he's not.
Okay. So I did some research. I found out just by their website that they had some other municipalities listed. I found out from a couple of Newton and Boston respectively that they also were not licensed in those communities. So certainly concerning. I don't know, the owner kind of attributes it to a lack of staff oversight, but I kind of find it a little suspicious, if you will, that they were operating in several communities and hadn't done their due diligence to obtain the proper licensure. So I certainly would like to take some time to review the documents that they did submit. Their manual, their operating manual, seems to have a lot of what the requirements have, but I certainly, I mean, technically by the code, I'm not supposed to issue a license until I have an opportunity to inspect the camp, or the board can issue a license at their discretion if they feel that the camp has provided all or met the requirements preliminarily anyways, prior to the camp opening, they can also issue a license through that route. But I certainly have some questions. I'd like to have a conversation with the owner before I would feel comfortable recommending issuing a license. I know one of the things that I saw on there was, I was curious if any of you knew if Laurel Field had any sort of a shelter on site, because technically there's supposed to be a shelter for emergencies if.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Okay, so I don't know if there would be any sort of alternative. I know Agent Orm had suggested in conversation maybe arrangements for, you know, if this ultimately does get approved, that would there be any means to transport the campers to another safe area to seek shelter in the event of some sort of an emergency. And then the other thing is technically, and also even more reinforced by recommended best practices for COVID prevention. And I think we did have a positive case out of this, but the hand washing facilities is something that's also required. So I don't know if there's any sort of water supply there, a hand sink. I doubt it, but I mean, maybe an alternative to that would be to have some sort of a portable hand sink put in there. But you know, those are just a couple of the questions that I had. And then going through the checklist and reviewing some of the documents, at least on the surface. I know in the manual it said that their healthcare, they did provide a medical doctor who was their healthcare consultant, but they also listed him as their healthcare supervisor on the application. So, I mean, that very well might be the case, but typically my experience is that the healthcare consultant trains a designated person who is like a first aid CPR certified person to be on site at all times to render first aid when needed. So I'm skeptical that a medical doctor would be on site at camp, but that very well might be the case. I'm not, but you know, they did list that.
Daryl or Tom, just a quick question, because we've had soccer and sports clinics in the past, and something that I know some of the sports clinics have done is they have shortened the hours and provided, like, you know, little tents with water jugs and things like that, but called it a clinic versus a camp, which has a different level of you know, sort of efforts and needs for the types of accommodations that you were just discussing, Tom. So Ellen, haven't we in the past, you know, there's been a differentiation between those types of things? So is that one possible option to avoid some of the issues that Tom has identified?
We have had that, and that was one of the first things I looked at. And when I sent it to Tom, I noted that their website, they themselves are calling it a camp. So, I mean, from what in the past, my understanding is if they call it a camp, no matter what the hours are, that's how you have to treat it. But I definitely defer that to either Tom or Mark.
So I guess my comment, Tom, is that I would like, my opinion is I'd like you to check everything out thoroughly before we issue a permit. And I'm just curious, have they, well, especially on the presence of someone who has some first aid abilities, I think that should be clarified before moving ahead.
Yeah, and they did send over a couple folks that do have first aid training. So I'm assuming that those folks, or one of them, would be the healthcare supervisor, but it does, on the application, it lists their healthcare consultant.
Yeah.
as the healthcare supervisor. And again, I find that hard to believe, but again, it might be the case. So I just want to clarify with them who is actually responsible for that piece.
And then out of curiosity, is this their first year of operating these kinds of activities?
I'm doing some research. It looks as though that the owner is I think maybe a former professional soccer player, if I'm not mistaken. And I think he may have done this at previous camp is listed as GPS Nike Sports Camp. So it seems like these guys have a little bit of experience, but it does say in their manual that they had some international employees or some employees that might be on, I don't know, student visa from the United Kingdom. So I clearly would want to see documentation of Corey's and Slurry's and international background checks as a requirement of the code to verify that that's all in order. They do have a statement in there, policies and procedures, that those folks have been vetted, but I don't have any tangible documentation of that, so I can't go on that. That's something that I would also check according to the camp inspection form in the code.
And getting back to the timing and the question Lisa had about the clinics, I just looking at the application that they just submitted today, it shows dates of operation August 2nd through August 12th. And that they had indicated they would be dropping off a check for that camp tomorrow morning. But they were also operating started the week of July 12th and also this week. So that was another question that I had is, would you be requiring a permit for the current week or the current session? If it's,
I mean, I don't think they can do that. They can't ask post facto for a permit. I mean, that's not appropriate. Right? I mean, if they started something July 12th and now are asking.
There's, but you could require it.
Oh, sorry, Ellen, what did you say? What did you say?
But I believe you could require it just if they provided all of the documentation.
Yeah, I'm saying that's just not an appropriate way of approaching it. You know, they should have submitted everything prior to, you know.
Oh yeah, they definitely should have.
But so I think what you're saying, Ellen, is you could require a permit that helps compensate a sum for the time Tom needs to spend on it.
Correct.
That is still wildly out of compliance. And so I don't think anybody's like, this is a fabulous pathway. I think it's more, what can we do to compensate for the fact that they operated without a permit and that Tom is needing to work on some of that during that window. Do I have that right, Ellen?
Yes.
And so from my standpoint, like, they were unpermitted when they did it. I don't think that should mean that they got to do it without paying permit fees or other parts, since Tom is dealing with it now when they're unpermitted. But I don't feel super strongly. I might be wrong.
I think it's reasonable. It's almost, I don't mean it to be punitive, but they should have done that. We can never ensure that everything was up to snuff when they operated the prior camps, but we can at least, well, once Tom has a chance to review the current application and materials, that might give some insight into what happened. And I do think it's important to be compensating the town for doing the band-aiding on things that they should have known. And if it's a learning experience, that's great, and they'll get it right in the future, so that'll be a good outcome in the long run. But it shouldn't be on the town to manage business.
I know the code allows the board to impose a fine. It's between $10 and $100 for operating a recreational camp without a license. I know another municipality sent them a cease and desist and told them they can't even operate for this season. because of the vetting that is involved with this. It's
Mhm.
you have to fly through a lot of documents. You have to make sure the background checks are in order. You have to verify immunization. So
Mhm.
it's very time consuming, and I know Agent Orm can speak to that from experience. So I just feel it's rather peculiar that they've been in several communities without the proper licensure. So
Yeah, except we didn't know about them. So if it wasn't for the positive COVID test, we wouldn't have even known. So
exactly, yeah. So I think they would try to. It seems as though maybe sneak under the radar. I don't know, but I
yeah.
know that certainly the previous suggestion, like I mean, they have way too many sessions, so they're calling themselves a camp number one, and then they have, I think it's the code says anything over 4 days, it's considered a camp anyway. So I mean, if they came back to me and said, well, we'll cut the times and we'll back off and we'll call ourselves a I don't know, soccer drop-in center or whatever, but I still have concerns anyways.
But I don't think it's fair to permit them to do things that we haven't permitted in the past. That seems like it's almost giving them an advantage, which I don't think is appropriate. And like other sports people entities have played by the rules. And
I agree.
And I think they need to play by the rules. So I don't think we should let them be, a camp at this point. I think that we should curtail their time period and say you have to, be a clinic and you were out of compliance. And, I mean, that's certainly not a very large penalty. But I mean, I know when my kids went to like, MPS and other things, it was always like a 4-day limit and they did play by the rules. And I guess I just don't think, why should we let someone who basically just did whatever they wanted without the appropriate controls and checks and balances sort of get away with it? That just doesn't seem equitable.
I tend to agree with that. It does feel sort of like, I mean, I don't think we can give them a pass on this, right? Like these things exist for a reason.
It's wrong.
No,
Yeah.
but I would almost rather, I'm guessing that the requirements for a camp are much steeper than for a clinic.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
At this point, I would rather see Tom go through with the checking of this application and make sure that they are doing everything really well. And versus have them default to something that doesn't get checked at all.
I don't think the clinics didn't get checked at all, Daryl. I think it was just a curtailment of of certain expectations. I'll leave it up to sort of you and Tom, but I think that there has to be repercussions for them operating without the appropriate checks and balances. That's not safe. And I also think you need to have like shelter because there have been ridiculous numbers of thunderstorms and lightning, and it's a safety issue. So you can't just have a bunch of kids on a field that's vulnerable to lightning. That's just not okay. So there has to be some kind of shelter for that.
So I think someone said it, but can remind me, has this been running yet in Sherborn, or when is it scheduled to run?
Yeah,
it has to be.
I mean, it seems to me that if it's running now, it needs to stop.
Yes,
We can
and Tom
redoc.
did stop it already. And that was one of the questions, is whether we just approve it and hope that the materials come through, but I don't think I want to do
I don't think I'm comfortable with that at this.
No.
That doesn't seem good.
And then I kind of thought, oh, okay, so Tom, maybe clear up for us for the requirements for a program or a clinic. How do they compare to the requirements for a camp?
Well, once it ceases calling itself a camp, it's kind of out of my peripheral of as a regulator. I don't. So I don't know if that's the answer.
Yeah, no, that's kind of what I thought.
They
That
presented
if we
themselves
keep them as a
camp, and
we can guarantee or come closer to assuring that there are more safety provisions and other provisions for the kids. But if it ceases to be a camp, then then it's doing whatever it's been doing so far
Exactly.
in a
Yeah.
shorter time frame or chopped up into smaller pieces.
Mhm.
I think it's important to emphasize that this is in fact a safety issue, right? Like kids are there
Yes.
all day and we have regulations for issue and it's a safety issue.
Yes.
There are some comments in the chat that would argue otherwise, but like this really is a safety issue. I wouldn't want my kid going to a camp that's no one has background checks and is unregulated and there isn't appropriate medical personnel. So like this is important. So I do think it should stop until it's appropriately vetted.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Safety, the background checks and all the
But
rest
these
is
are
so
not-
important for people.
And these are state regulations, just to be clear. So we're not in a
Yes.
position to say, oh, you didn't follow the regulations. I mean, that's cool. Like, these are the state ones. We can't decide that we don't follow them.
Yeah, and I can add it, and I've seen this before. If they're not meeting the camp regulations, they shouldn't be operating. I know it gets a little difficult to work with when they're being sponsored by, say, a town recreation department. And I'm not saying ours, but I've dealt with it before. And again, I have seen attempts to go just below the definition. And you just look in the definition of a day camp, and they try to operate for 2 hours, no more than 4 days within a 2-week period. Very difficult for sports camps to do that. So they most likely are going to hopefully go forward and be a day camp with all the requirements being met. And again, I'll leave that up to Tom. Tom's well versed in this, but all you got to do is look in the definition of a day camp. And if they're a day camp or even advertised as a day camp, they have to meet the regulations of the state.
And so I just want to be mindful of time because I know we've got like 4 agents business. So it sounds like collectively we're saying they need to get in compliance before they can operate. If they choose to operate as a day camp, that is certainly reasonable and something we have no objections to, but they then need to satisfy those conditions and may not operate a day camp while they don't. Does that sound like?
Yeah, I think that sounds good. If they're able to produce the appropriate documentation and come into compliance, then they can operate. That makes sense.
Right, and not until Tom has
exactly.
thoroughly reviewed everything to his satisfaction. Okay, so hopefully that'll be a good motivator for them to pull it together quickly.
And just looking at this on the service, they already have sent over significant amount of documents that I have to go through. So it seems as though they have some semblance of what they're supposed to be doing. They just never went through the process. So I'll just vet it and contact the owner and see if we can arrange some sort of a meeting.
Okay, and then once you get a chance to see what the current documentation looks like, then we can talk about going back to the prior, because I think we'll have a better sense of what maybe next steps to take about the prior camps that they did hold already and how to address that. Does that make sense following your review now?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
I would suggest too, and to make it quick, if it is a town-sponsored camp, maybe they can help with the sheltering piece of it. Maybe look for an open library. Well, I know not library at this point, but an open school or a meeting room in town hall. They will just have to work on how do you transport the campers safely and effectively.
Yeah, I don't know what's been done at other times.
I think we just need to table this because we have so much
Yeah.
to do at 9:45.
Okay.
And I apologize. I'm going to have to leave the meeting now because I'm on call. So sorry, everyone. Glad I was able to make it this far. I'll see you at the next meeting.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you.
And we look forward to the next update on that. All right. How about we take a mental break and do something simple? We had 2 sets of minutes. March. Yeah.
You want to do the 2 temporary food establishments?
Oh, yeah, that's all right. We'll do that. Those are
might have left,
too. All right. Let's see. So they're 2-day. All right. So do we have a motion to approve the temporary 2-day food establishment permit for Kona Ice of Framingham?
So moved.
Okay, and I'll second. Any other comment? Have they ever had a permit in town before?
No.
Okay. All right, so Daryl, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
All right, and do we have a motion to approve the temporary one-day food establishment permit for Rib Public BBQ?
So moved.
Cute. Seconded.
Yes, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right, any other comments?
No.
Okay, Daryl, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
All right. All right, so we had the March 3rd and the April 7th minutes. I submitted some, I think, minor comments on both. I don't know if other people have, but do we have a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So moved.
I have something that, can I just make one comment on one of the minutes?
Okay, if it's quick, I don't want to be trying to write it here, but okay.
It's very quick. So it's on the April 7th minutes, and it's under section B of number 9, which is abrasion. In the last paragraph, MRSA.
Oh, yeah, no, Matt Beavers had corrected that already.
Okay. So MRSA is MRSA.
Yeah, I got that one.
That's it.
Okay. All right. So do we have a second to the motion?
Second.
Okay, any other comments? Daryl, aye.
Lisa, I.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
All right. How about agents business?
Yeah, Daryl, it's up to you what you want to do first.
Let's
yeah.
just go. Let's
I
just go
think
number
there's-
order.
I mean,
Okay.
definitive.
Was there somebody waiting though? I thought I
That's what I was
saw.
wondering. I don't know if anyone's out
We have
there.
at least 2, if not 3 parties waiting.
I think 124 Bogastow might be in the audience.
Yeah, and 24 North
24
Main.
North Main is also there.
Oh.
He's been here since the beginning.
Oh, I'm sorry.
36
you
Ash
got-
Lane also here.
What's that?
Yeah, they're all
36.
Yep. So let's just go through in order to just kind of get through, because I think adjudicating who got here first hours ago is going to be tough.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. That's fine.
Okay.
We have 124 Bogastow Brook Road.
Yeah.
The applicant, the owner's listed there, and he is here. So hi, Matthew. So he's looking to do a second well, and I went over with his engineer as well as with Matthew, the regulation that the Board of Health has in respect to additional second wells. And it's under section 7 of our regulations in the well regulations. What we say is that you're not allowed a second well unless there's a consideration for the acreage. A consideration for commercial agriculture, which in speaking with our building commissioner, commercial agriculture is allowed as a right after your 5 acres or more. And so I'm going to let Matt explain his business. And I did explain to him sometimes when a new well is drilled, you might get enough water production to not need the old well, but again, if the board's okay with it, I'll let Matt explain his position for requesting a second well on his property. And if ultimately the board wishes to approve it, you have to have a report completed once you have to draw that well down to prove it's not affecting the abutters wells. So again,
And actually, Mark, if I could, there was no documentation of why this well was even being sought. And that is a specific aspect of
It
the
is.
regulation we put in. And so I would just respectfully say, could you come back when you have the documentation that we can review, instead of just having this initial discussion, because I'm just not at all comfortable even weighing in on this on a casual basis without some kind of rationale about why you're even seeking the second well, which we're really trying to dissuade people from doing due to the, lack of, the finite nature of the groundwater supply for potable water, which is our number one sort of priority, and really trying to dissuade people from installing additional wells with, the climate change and additional stressors that are put on our potable water. So I would respectfully ask that you put together, sort of the rationale behind why you're even seeking this before you come before the board.
We had prepared a letter that was submitted that I believe should be in possession of the board that had spelled out the rationale and bullet points.
We don't have it. We do not have it. It was not in the materials that we received.
Mark, I mean, there's no posted email address for the Board of Health. We've had 4 different emails bounce back. We had sent it to Mark yesterday morning, who we've been in communication with. Okay, I guess we'll have to get on the next meeting then.
All right, I did want to go over a couple things, since I believe what you're thinking of doing with the property is something agricultural, and that would be part of the, I guess that's the driver for looking at an irrigation well. I don't know, and this is something for the board to consider in terms of information that might be included from the homeowners. Is it clear that you need the water? And have you firmed up what your plans are? Could installation of a well wait until
Yeah, I mean, we have plants in soil right now that need to be irrigated. If they're not going to be irrigated via this proposed irrigation well, we'll have to look at alternative solutions to irrigate our crop that's already in soil right now this year.
I mean, again, I would say I totally hear your frustration and I'm sympathetic. I think at the same time, it's like we have a regulation. We're trying to bypass the regulation. The regulation is something that the board put in place because we have had a number of wells draw down, and it's a really important issue for the abutters. And so I think that's the point Lisa's trying to get at. I think the questions I'd want to see addressed in the follow-up is, what's the expected flow rate that you plan to use from the well? What's the strategy you have to systematically evaluate the impact on your abutters to demonstrate no harm? The additional question I have is related to, we've got, it looks like an in-ground pool and pump house on the property, and understanding how that flow is integrated or can be mitigated as an offset strategy. For me, those are the pieces I'd want to see ahead of time in terms of contextualizing why we're doing it, because we
You're saying that the pool utilized as a water source for our crop?
No, I'm saying if you're pumping from your well as part of how you maintain your pool, that is a draw that you're doing. No, again, so I'm just saying, I see pool, I see pump house. So I want to know, where is pool water coming from? Is that coming from groundwater? Are there strategies if you say, boy, we're pumping from groundwater now, we can do this to mitigate the pool. We think that we're going to have X thousands of gallons of flow from an irrigation well. We use Y thousands of gallons to the pool. We think that by doing it this way, we can offset. For the thing we're trying to address is that we've seen people whose wells are pulled down, and I don't want your neighbor coming back in 6 months saying, hey, you let them put in an irrigation well, they did X, Y, and Z, and now I have to drill a well because my well's dry. And so that's the problem we're dealing with. And so I think for you, our biggest concern isn't to try to say you can't have a well. It's to say we've literally seen people whose wells were run dry, and we said we need to mitigate that, and we need to make sure that your project doesn't run that risk.
I mean, that's understandable, but there's 200 acres of woodland and pasture behind these properties. There's no one else other than the abutters that are drawing from this area. You know what I mean? I understand that downtown there's a serious water concern, but we're out at the edge of town and it is complete forest. All of these lots are 5, 6, 7 acres in size. And, you know, there are other farms, no doubt, within a mile radius of this farm right here that have multiple wells that were grandfathered in prior to this clause in 2018. And the other part is we're really only going to be utilizing this irrigation well for 3 months out of the year. So it's really a temporary well.
So totally hear that. I think my goal isn't, like, I think Lisa sort of established, not comfortable talking about here the frustrations and the timeliness. We'll have another meeting in the first Wednesday of August. So
the next meeting is August 18th.
Oh, because of the August dates. Okay. So again, like
my plants need to be irrigated by August 18th. So if we're not going to be able to have the solution before then we're going to have to look at other solutions. So,
okay.
I mean, I think we could respect, I thought the whole point was that we were going to be able to get on the agenda for a vote today. We had sent over the documentation. I've been in communication with Mark every other day for the last few weeks. We had the Conservation Commission come out who signed off and approved and said there's going to be minimal environmental impact from our plan. So, I mean, I'm frustrated because we sent the documentation over and yet the board is saying they didn't receive it. This was yesterday morning. Mark, did you receive
I mean, but again, just to be clear, like the typical pattern isn't we're getting materials the day of the meeting or the day before the meeting. So again, even if you sent it yesterday morning, just for the context, like that's not when we usually get stuff to review at a board meeting.
Okay, well, Mark, I'm just going off of the communication that I had with the agent of the board who told me the timeline of and what I should expect. And now I'm saying that the materials that I sent over to him were not received. And I've had emails bounce back. There's no email address posted online for the Board of Health. So we're just trying to navigate when there's not a whole lot of clarity around the process.
So I want to just hit a pause. I totally hear that you're frustrated, and I'm sure I'd feel really frustrated too in your position. Mark, in terms of I think that Lisa's concern, totally hear and don't disagree with, because the questions I have are really, do we have the complete information that we've described as wanting in the materials that were submitted? Because if not, it's a totally moot point, because we need to be able to say.
It's a fair point. Yes, we do. What happened, I just looked at my email and I forwarded that email to Daryl and to Ellen just a minute ago. I didn't see it. It came in 11:28 yesterday morning. But it is there and it had attachments to it. I don't know if Daryl or Ellen can look at their email, but he did have, and I haven't even seen it, but the attachments were labeled according to his plan, and I'd have to open it too, but he did submit. I will agree with Matt that he did submit it. It just didn't get seen by me. He did submit a revised plan. So Matt, again, we've been out straight with various issues, but again, he does have a letter to the Board of Health here, and I don't know if it's too soon for.
Yeah, I mean, it's 10 o'clock, and we didn't. I like, we need to review these things so that we can, make a good technical decision. And I'm not saying I'm adverse to this. It's just I haven't seen this information, and it's 10 o'clock now, and we had scheduled hearings. So.
And that's fair. I mean, this didn't come in until yesterday. So that's the other part of the other side of the coin.
Right. And ordinarily, as Matt said earlier, sometimes we're able to turn things around in a day or two, but it's not a guarantee. And there's a regulated amount of time that we have to review things. So
I first spoke with Mark about probably 7 weeks ago was the first time.
We're not saying the first time. We're not saying the first time you spoke to Mark. We're saying if you're asking or saying I submitted this yesterday, why hasn't it been distributed and reviewed? That's not the typical cadence for most of the things that we do. And so, like, we don't have the information we need, as Lisa's point. And like, we're not going to go into it more right now. The thing I want to make sure is that I don't want to come back and, a couple of weeks from now say, we still have more information that we need. So that's my goal for right now, is to make sure either the letter has the information we need and we're done, or this is the additional information that needs to be submitted so you can get a definitive decision next, which is your goal. So Mark or Daryl or Ellen, in terms of the things we'd want, I think we want an explicit articulation of how a lack of impact will be demonstrated on abutters. I think I would want to make sure abutters were aware of the plan for it so that they had a chance to review any public materials for it. And then I think, Lisa, to your point, this sort of specific pattern, this is the pattern of use that's planned. And Matt, in terms of the letter you submitted, do you have expected flow and expected patterns of use for like, this is the water volume?
What our needs are, or what the existing well is?
What your needs are. So what?
Yeah, we need at a minimum of 30 gallons per minute flow rate during our peak growing season. Outside of that peak growing season, like I said, this irrigation well is going to be used very minimally outside of those months.
And is that reflected in the materials that you submitted to Mark yesterday in terms of because the thing I'm going to know, I want to know is, how do we make sure there's no impact that's an explicit part of our regulation? How do we know what?
I mean, here's my take: is these wells in this neighborhood were drilled in the late 70s or early 80s. They were drilled at a depth of like 160 to 200 feet. Now, what I understand about well drilling is that a normal irrigation well is roughly 200 feet depth. That's for non-potable water. So we're talking about getting a depth greater than, probably significant depth greater than any of the existing wells, right? Like,
okay, so hold on.
Like
just
maybe
a
going
moment.
500,
So-
600, 700 feet deep in order to achieve the 30 per gallon flow rate that I need. It's not a residential house that only needs 7 to 15. We need greater than that. These houses aren't drilling at these depths. We have the ability to drill below to hit another aquifer that's not even going to impact. So what about drill depth? If we're talking about
if you can,
500
Matt,
feet of depth?
Matt, hold on just a moment. We deal with wells in town all the time. We're familiar with drilling. Really, we look at what, 100 or so a year of wells. So there's not a separate aquifer that you're going to be tapping into. You're going to be drawing from bedrock fractures. They're interconnected underground. It's impossible practically to evaluate how they're interconnected just because it's hard for us to see underground, as I'm sure you could appreciate. You do not know where the fractures that you might be connecting to are running to. It could be a direct connection to your neighbor. It could be to something 3 miles away. There is not a way to know that. So part of what we also look at, because you can tell us drilling deeper is better, and the reason people keep going deeper is because we're using up the water that's in the more shallow areas. So there's an overall issue of general depletion of groundwater over time, especially when you're bringing it up for irrigation, because there's a lot of evapotranspiration. So we try to be really careful about this. So we're not trying to be jerks. We are just
I understand that. Sorry, I get frustrated.
And so what we also want people to think about is, are you sure you need that water? Because once there's another tap and access to it, it seems like it's free water, just like when people put up signs during droughts and they're irrigating their lawn and they're like, hey, no problem, we have an extra irrigation well. Well, it's all going into the shared resource together. So that's why having an understanding of, does your agriculture need it? You know, is it stuff that you're planting that can't live off of regular rainfall? Yes or no? And can your existing well possibly supply that? Yes or no? As Matt said, mitigating measures around the pool. I don't know what that might mean, but it's worth a consideration. Could you collect rainwater and make up for it, or is that just insufficient? So there are just other things we want to make sure too that you've thought through, so that we avoid the problems that we
well, the water is
towns
likely
in the whole area see of
for sure. The
greater
likely water,
stress on groundwater.
the water is likely to be drawn from this aquifer regardless of whether we have this well or not, right? Because the alternative is that we're filling water. We have water holding tanks on the property that we're pumping out of, that we're filling via this well right here. Now, I'm not going to get the flow rates going into our water collection, but we'll get the flow rates that we need going out. So either way, it's going to be coming from this, whether it's coming from the new well or the existing well. I mean, we do plan on having rainwater collection, but that system hasn't been designed, and quite frankly, that's the alternative from an investment standpoint to what we would invest in this well.
Okay, So
yeah, and
anyway.
our growing methods are organic and using cover crops. And to your point, Daryl, I think we are striving for on year 2, year 3, year 4 not needing irrigation because we've built out our soil and our our cover crop and enough that the water's holding. I mean, the earth is holding water. We're
that we need for most of the growth season.
We're following those practices of organic gardening. But it's in the meantime that we were hoping to have.
Okay, and so that could be another consideration, is whether after a certain time period is passed, whether the well becomes decommissioned.
And it's also future-proofing our existing infrastructure, right? So this current well, which we just had the pump replaced last summer, it's at 160-foot depth. If that well runs dry, well, we have, conceivably have another well that's deeper that all we have to do is trench out and connect it to our house. So like that's the other is to future-proof our property where we plan to live for the next 30 years so that water isn't an issue. And also speaking to our needs right now for my livelihood.
And that's where the board can help us, because honestly, one of the things in the letter was that our concern, as to your point about stressing wells of abutters, we're worried about stressing our own home well, which is why we were seeking an irrigation well, so that we wouldn't be compromising our home's water.
And
I think just for future consideration, another thing you could consider is just drilling a well deeper like you're proposing, and then decommissioning your current well. So have something that has more yield that can satisfy your needs for potable water use in your home, as well as, this irrigation period. And then you'll have one well that could satisfy both those needs, and you could decommission maybe your current shallower well.
It's $25,000 worth of trenching work to get that proposed well location back to the existing well location. So I'd love to be able to do that. And if push comes to shove, or we're stuck between a rock and a hard place, we might be forced to do that. But I'm not trying to trench that 200 plus feet right now.
So in terms of next steps, Mark, you will review the letter, and if we can communicate to the homeowners ASAP in terms of any outstanding questions. And Matt, has there been any abutter notification in terms of, are your neighbors aware of this? Do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, our neighbors have been included on the planning of everything we've done in starting.
The closer neighbors, 130.
130. We do not have a relationship with the neighbors at 116, but 130 is by far the closest proximity. I mean, we're talking 700, 800, 900 feet. So the 70 Bullard Street, this is the back of a 37-acre property, a long, narrow 37-acre property that runs down to Bullard Street, which is a mile away from our home.
And
so that home's on Bullard Street. That's not anywhere near.
In terms of the well on 130, do you have the siting for that well in terms of the distance from your well? The proposed irrigation well?
Not on this map, but it's. I mean, it's like.
I think that would be
like 500 feet. I mean, it's over 500 feet.
Yeah.
So part of what we have to decide is not just your property, but it's also to say we have a consistent pattern we're following across properties. And so we still make specific decisions, as you've seen with lots of stuff tonight, about sort of how do we try to get to yes within the confines of the regulations, to think about what that looks like. And so I think that it's hard for me to imagine that we wouldn't want to have insight into where the neighbor's well is physically. So if you guys can pin that down, I don't know that it has to be on the well plan, although I think that would be helpful, just so we can kind of say we know what the distance is on their property specifically. Because if somebody at a 2-acre parcel wanted to do the same thing, I need to ask it of them, and they'd say, well, why didn't you ask it for that property on Bogsdale?
Okay. And we can pull that plot map that's on record with the Board of Health in order to determine that distance.
I think you can. They're not all in the existing plot maps on our files. And so I think just again, to just check in with them to say, like, there are wells that are older that we have files or well plans for, and they'll say, oh, it's over here. So I wouldn't count on the fact that the plan that they dug that well with is something that's the board necessarily has. It certainly may if it was more recent construction, but for older housing, we don't always have it. So I think start with the board files, but if it's not there,
connect with them to be able to define and say, we know it's 500 feet from our well, because I think that's a last category of question I imagine having.
Okay.
But don't you have the coordinates of every well?
No. Because I mean, there's some wells
but
here
it's
that
provided in all the applications. No.
But some of the houses are built in like the 19th century. So like we have no idea where they are. So some of it depends on the construction. That neighborhood's newer, and so we likely have it, but I don't know that for sure. Ellen, do I have that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And so if it's a new neighborhood, I think there's a very good chance that it's in the file, but just want to flag, don't put all your eggs in that basket. Check the file first, because it's probably there, because Bogstow is a newer neighborhood. But if it's not, pinning that down with your neighbor to say, we just want to make sure we know how far the well is from our proposed well location.
I will just say that if it was built prior to 1984, it's possible we would have it, but it's also highly possible that we wouldn't, because back in 1984, the town administrator at the time purged all the Board of Health files. So after 1984, we would likely have it.
And I can add a couple things. This is a whole new process to us in respect to reviewing a second well. So I'm going to have to go over the logistics with the chairperson on if the abutters are to be notified for the next meeting. And two, how do we go about testing the effects to the abutters wells? Because if you're going to test any effect to the abutters wells, you would need to drill a well, see if there's a drawdown on your abutters, and if so, then what do you do? So this is all new, and Darryl, I'll go over all that with you on a sidebar, but it's all new to us, and this would be our first.
Darryl, I don't know what your bandwidth is. I certainly have bandwidth if you want to pass some of this on, and I can tap you in for some of the drawdown questions. Would that be helpful?
Sure. There are ways that it could be done. There's another thing for the applicants to consider. If an interest is to get out of the setback from the leaching system area here, and in the long term have this well take over for the existing well, one could also, and the trenching is expensive, you could consider just doing this closer with the plans of decommissioning the existing well and look for something closer in here. Or potentially deepening this well, but it's probably in your best interest to get a little farther from the septic system. So, you know, there's probably nothing magical about this spot.
So Darryl,
there actually is. That's actually directly between our two growing fields. So we need access to be able to run our irrigation tapes centrally. And the way the fencing, there's fencing all in here between the house and the fields that prevents us from being able to run all types of hoses, east to west, as this map is.
Darryl, do you want to be point or do you want me to be point? I'm cheerfully flexible.
You are more than welcome to be point.
Perfect. So Mark, I'm happy to connect with you to think through some of this. And Darryl, if we have some more technical questions, I'll reach out. And then Matt, we'll work on this with you, okay?
Appreciate it. Thanks.
All right. All right. Matt, my email address is listed on the Sherborn website. I will also direct message it to you in the chat so that we can kind of connect directly, okay?
And the other thing is the email address for the Board of Health is health@sherbornma.org.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and just so you,
that's not.
I looked everywhere I could and couldn't find it. Just so you guys know, if that's something you want to be getting emails.
Okay, we'll take a look.
All right, guys, let's move on to next agent's.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Sorry it didn't get resolved tonight. I didn't expect that it would, frankly, because this is a very complicated issue. So hopefully we gave enough information. All right, 24 North Main.
Okay, and Darryl, you shouldn't have information on this from previous decisions, but I can give you a summary of what has happened. The Board of Health received a new request for the use of the building at 24 North Main. Originally, it was a 4-bedroom house, converted over to a salon, no use of the second floor. And then now they would like to convert it from a salon to an office building, they being the new applicants. They should be here. They've listed their names as Sean and Kelly Hogan. They've run into a situation where because there's a present deed that limits the use of the second floor, the bank will not allow them to move forward when it comes to, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, to funding for the project. So the only...
Yeah, just a quick correction
go
on
ahead,
that.
Sean.
It was the spa, and then he changed the use to a coffee shop and restaurant, and that's where the second floor restriction came into play.
Thank you.
And
that's
then
correct.
he changed it back to the
spa.
spa.
Yeah.
But the zoning was correct, but the restriction never got corrected.
And believe it or not, he never got to the coffee shop either. So thank you for that help there. It did never get there. But so there's a deed recording attachment to a deed already out there. And the only way I see to change this is to put an addendum to this that mimics pretty much or takes the language from the Board of Health decision in their meeting, I believe in June or May, to go back to add that new decision as a separate deed recording. So it cleans up, it amends the previous deed recording.
And so this is the one that you're referring to, correct?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and here the approved change to in use to office space only.
Yeah. Mentions the date of the Board of Health meeting.
Yeah.
It's a document, I think, that will help Sean get to the location where he needs, to the point where he needs to be.
Yeah, it seems straightforward. I haven't thought of any slippery slope issue.
The only way it would be
misinterpretation or
if,
something, but
if they decide not to do this, then it would be a back and forth situation.
right. But do you think that this would meet the needs that you have?
And
and go ahead, Ellen.
Yeah, last Thursday, I believe it was, after Mark left the office for the day, I think he talked to Sean last Thursday, and he suggested that he have the bank call our office if he had any questions, if they had any questions. And then, but it was after Mark left, the bank representative did call. So I spoke with him. His name was William Henning. And I explained the situation that the board had met with the Hogans about changing it to office space. The board had agreed that the second floor could be used as office space. And the board had sent a letter to the ZBA, saying there was no issues with it being used as office space. But because of the deed recording that the current, soon to be previous owner put on for the coffee shop, it was problematic. So I assured Mr. Henning that the board did agree that office space could be used. The second floor could be used for office space. And with him, I developed this deed recording document. And then the question was, what I had for Mr. Henning was, well, Gary Lebarski is the current owner. How?
Yeah. I was gonna bring that up, Ellen.
I doubt that he would pay the money to record this.
Right.
Prior to the the transfer of property.
Yes.
But Mr. Henning said that if the board agrees to it, I can provide it to the Hogans. They're scheduled to close, I think it's on the 27th of this month. And the bank said that they would record it at that time when the Hogans become the owners with their mortgage. So it would be recorded then.
Yeah, I mean, I think technically from a legal perspective, in fact, the previous deed recording needs to be terminated. You can't have two contrary recordings on the same property. So I think we need to terminate the previous one.
My experience has been you can never terminate it.
Oh, no, you
cannot-
can. You definitely can. I've done it I've worked with clients to do it many times. But if the bank is willing to, finance it, then only the current owner of a property can sign a deed recording that's valid. So he is correct saying like, you can't have the previous owner do it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I kind of understand like why that doesn't work. But so is he saying the bank would approve it and then the new owners would sign it and then it would get recorded?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I think that works. That works.
And Mark, just to be sure, so for any of the office uses that they foresee, I'm assuming that their flows are comfortably within the capacity of the system.
That is correct. It's 75 gallons per 1,000 square feet. They'll be well within the within the present 440 gallons per day.
Okay, yeah, that's what
I
I
think
thought.
that might be reflected in the minutes of May 5th.
All right, so does this sound reasonable to the owners? Future owners, excuse me, future owners.
It does, with the only correction that the date of the closing is actually the 28th, not the.
It's an update. It's just an update. It's not a correction.
Yeah.
You weren't wrong.
Yeah, it's changed a few times. So currently it's set for the 28th.
Okay. All right, so do we have, well, do we need a motion, Ellen?
I can't hear you, Daryl. You faded out.
I'd suggest a motion, Daryl.
Yes, I'll do a motion. Okay, do we have a motion to approve this deed restriction language?
So moved.
Okay.
Any other comments? Daryl, aye.
Lisa, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay. All right. Good. And look forward to this being wrapped up for you, but let us know if there's anything else.
Thanks so much for your help. Really appreciate it.
Okay. All right, Mark, so 14 Kendall?
I guess my only question is anybody from 14 Kendall here? Because if not, I know 36 Ash Lane is here.
All right, so then let's skip that one.
Hey, Daryl, your audio is really not good.
Yeah, well, I have a feeling that as I said, I get messages constantly about unstable internet all day, every day of the week. So I don't know what else I could do about that. Other than let Mark or somebody else do most of the talking for this. How about that?
So Mark,
Sure. I can recommend approval of this plan. Just so the board knows, I was out there with Dan McIntyre, the professional engineer for the plan. The perk tests were 17 and 18 minutes per inch, well within our regulations. The groundwater was found at 66 inches.
Mark, just to confirm, are you doing 36 Ash, which is what Daryl has up? Or
Oh, geez, Daryl, I'm sorry. Geez, I got on my side of me, I have 30. I'm sorry, I have Kendall Ave on my right side. I wasn't even looking at the screen. Back to 36 Ash Lane. That one's real easy. What happened was the owner decided to remove a bedroom from the main house and decided to add a full bathroom to the garage, which has a lounge type loft area. So that is where the other bedroom was replaced to. That's really not a major issue. That all got resolved through the building application. But what's pending is they want to put in a half bathroom in the pool house area, which is to the left of the house. You'll see it. I don't know if you can enlarge it, but it's to the left of the house. And to get the plumbing in, they have to go pump prior to a septic tank. Thank you, Daryl. And so you'll see where that red dotted line is, there's a green line that goes under it or through it. That's the line for the plumbing that is going to go into the house. And then in the house, they're putting in a pump system. If you pump prior to the septic tanks, which are over to the far right, where the main house is, you need to make sure of two things. One, the pumps do not create more than 60 gallons per minute. And the engineer noted there's a pump in there that will have to be replaced because it will be too strong and too powerful and prevent the flow that's required. And it has to be 25% or less of the total daily flow from the house, which it is because it's only handling the pool house area, not the bedrooms. So with that said, I don't see an issue with that. There was a correction to the septic tank. The septic line coming from the house to the tank, and that's right where you see the house where it jets out in the front. You'll see a red line measuring the distance. I think it's 21. I don't have that plan right in front of me. But they straighten the tank out so the line coming out of the house is a straight line per state code. And that was done with my review with Gigi Munden, the engineer. So with that said, the plan is now in compliance to be approved as a revision to a previously approved plan.
So you're saying they got rid of a bedroom? So is it still a 4-bedroom house, or is
It's going to be I think it's a 5-bedroom. And so they replaced, what they did is the house is a 4-bedroom now, and the 5th bedroom is over in the garage slash loft.
So they sort of had a 5-bedroom system.
Yes.
Still need a 5-bedroom system, just moved one of the bedrooms from one building to another.
Exactly. And the board, just so the board knows, they can't go past that. So they're within the confines of the original approval being the older house that got demolished, which was they got the additional bedroom. So it went from a 4 to a 5-bedroom. So they're kind of they're not trapped, but they're confined to a 5-bedroom house.
Sounds good. So.
All right, do we have a motion to approve the plan subject? Oh.
And just so the board knows.
We don't need anything subject. This is just a.
It's a revision, right?
Subject to meeting, following the plan. And I think Gigi's here online. I just noticed her. So I don't know if she has any comments. The engineer is here if there's any questions for the engineer.
Yeah, please let me know if you have any questions.
No, I feel good. A plan that's totally compliant is lovely.
So I'd recommend approval of this revision to a previously approved plan.
Okay.
Sounds good.
We have a motion for that approval.
So moved. Second.
Daryl, aye.
Lisa, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay.
Have a good night, guys.
Thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
Okay, 14 Kendall.
We'll start all over again with 14 Kendall. I apologize. It's late, and I for some reason I started reviewing the plan, but as I noted, Dan McIntyre is the engineer. The perk tests were within our requirements. The deep holes, one deep hole had models, but the other one didn't. Dan went ahead and did a Frimpter adjustment, and it came very close to where the model were. One deep hole was adjusted with 68 inches. As long as it's greater than 60 inches below grade, it meets our code. And the models were found on the other deep hole number 2, models were found at 66 inches. And Dan confirmed it in deep hole number 3 with a groundwater adjustment showing 68 inches. So, and we went over that actually Monday just to confirm, the correct well he used for his comparison well. With that said, those are the two major criteria. Well, that and meeting all distance requirements, which it does meet. The well's 133 feet uphill from the septic system. So that it needs to be 125, so that exceeds that requirement by 8 feet. And it's ready for approval, just so the board knows. It is presently 3 bedrooms and they're 2 bedrooms and they're planning to go to 3. It's a 2-bedroom house.
Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the plans as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Darrell, aye.
Lisa, aye.
This is conditional to the garbage grinder deed.
Oh, thank you, Ellen. Yes, I'm falling asleep on my job. Conditional with that deed recording for the garbage grinder prohibition. Thank you, Ellen. Sorry.
Thank you, Ellen. Darrell, aye.
Lisa, I. Rebecca Honeywell, I.
Natalie, aye.
Okay. We did those. ZBA petition. Okay. I think what I saw was someone needs to speak with this person about exactly what kind of retail specialty food store they are going to be, because I live in South Maine. I meant to look that up and then ended up down at the Charles River. So I'm not sure what building that is.
It's where the bike shop is.
Oh, okay. So, and we've had this before when people were trying to get into this building, 19 North Main, thinking they always thought they would have, really? I thought they were both North Main at that point. But anyway, to do specialty food stores, but that can, depending on how they do it, that can trigger septic requirements. And I doubt that those things have much opportunity. So they should really, before they get a permit, they need to speak to us about the feasibility of even doing whatever it is. And maybe it's just all packaged foods and that might fly, but
I happened to be, I think I was at the select board meeting where they were presenting for their liquor license. And my recollection is that it sounded something similar to the wine and provision shop for Heritage, that it was like mostly prepackaged, you know, sort of prepared luxury foods as opposed to on-site dining for those pieces, but certainly would make sense for them to talk to Mark.
yeah, because the Heritage, the former out, they had to avail themselves of septic system capacity for the Heritage system to have any kind of prepared foods. Once you prepare anything there or divide something up,
I think it was like packaged, like I think it was like fancy cheese and olive oil and those things, as opposed to like we made a quiche. But again, that was just a select board meeting I happened to be on. I don't know if Jeff is on or if he remembers any more from that.
All right, so
if you scroll down, there's pictures. I don't know how easily you can see them.
Is it in the old sandwich shop?
No.
No, upstairs in the Velo bike shop is going to be done. And
So the
that's gonna
bike
be a
shop's
little bit-
gone? Okay.
I think the next page is, yeah. This is a picture of, I guess, their Maynard store.
They have, to be their third store.
It kind of looks like the Sitco, but with more food and wine.
Higher end,
yeah,
gourmet type. They have a store in Belmont they've had for 16 years. I'm hopefully allowed to speak. And they opened the one that Ellen just mentioned in Maynard, I think 5 years ago. But we did grant them the liquor license, as Matt noted. But it's our understanding was that it's entirely, when we say package, it's also not like something they just put saran wrap around.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Described, but it's really, you know, more or less like a grocery store, a gourmet grocery store, I would say, with beer and wine only.
Yeah. And
okay, so maybe then the only note has to be that they need to come speak to us to ensure that they've got the
Exactly. They're
appropriate
going to
food
need
permit.
to, I have a feeling it's going to be that night. The state created a new flow for groceriettes and so forth because these are becoming very popular. It's 97 gallons per, I believe, 1,000 square feet. They'll need to present to us the square footage and so forth. Tom will review the food application. I'll review the building permit, and that also will include the septic design flow. The septic system there is very old. It's not the newest septic system, but it has had a historical 500 gallons per day flow. So they've always been allowed to go with that flow. This being a retail food store versus a restaurant, they will not need an outside grease trap, but which would be a large septic tank, but they will need to go through the plumbing inspector because it's producing food waste. I believe they're going to cut some of the cheese and all that, and maybe small preparation. Again, I'm going to have to double check that. I spoke to the owner of the proponent, I'd say about 4 or 5 months ago. But if they are producing or have sinks that require warewashing and so forth, then they will need to deal with the plumbing inspector on an internal grease trap. And that's the best I can offer at this time.
Okay, now I'm finally clued into where 11 South Main is, and they did have food prep in that building in the past.
They
So
did, but
there is
now
the potential for it. It is not a simple septic system there, that's for sure. But
yeah,
and I think they took out the old grease trap. But okay, so they need to just come to us and talk to us about right permitting and septic.
I believe at one time it was a Subaru car dealership.
Okay.
But they're it's very cooperative, and they're very experienced, having 2 other stores, one of which they've had for 16 years in Belmont. So I'm sure that they've been through that kind of procedure in Belmont.
Yeah, except for the septic provision issue. All right, so then the next one, same thing. It depends on what kind of professional and business offices. If it's a dentist, big difference from someone who comes in and processes paper. So again, we'll need, and these folks in the past, we've certainly had lots of discussions. The Board of Health has had tons of discussions with them about what can and cannot go into that building. Maybe they're hoping we've forgotten, or maybe they remember what it is and it'll go smoothly.
Do we know, Daryl, do we know the businesses that are planned for 19 North Main?
I don't.
The renewal, so it's for what's already there.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Oh, all right.
There's someone new going in.
Renewal of the
So that shouldn't be an issue. It's
yeah. Okay, if it's continuing to be this, thank you, Ellen, to be the same, then okay. Although, right, I guess I read it assuming that it was, yes, you can have professional and business offices and they're renewing that permit, but the makeup of who's in there could vary. But okay, so maybe it's not that complex. And then kind of the same thing, it depends on exactly what kind of professional offices and retail space.
Daryl, just so you know, Ellen and I picked up on a deficiency at that location. They had not finished a final, I believe it was a fence or a wall that the board required when they put in the septic system. So I think this is the time we say it's time to finish that condition.
Oh, okay, and then we could catch the other stuff at that time.
Yeah,
the application indicates that it's a small 400 square foot retail gift shop.
Okay.
Sherborn Gallery and Gifts. And then Landmark Residential, which Nora Lynch is a realtor, so it's a real estate office.
Okay. All right, so is that clear? Kind of note to send over, email over to ZBA? All right, great.
So just on the first one and the third one, correct?
First, yeah, if that's what a renewal means, is that they can't.
What's there?
Okay. Okay. Let's see. Oh, what am I doing? did the minutes. If anyone has anything for the next agenda, particular, farm pond, we're still working on the algae bloom issue. It's happening again this summer. I'll be trying to meet with the Farm Pond Advisory. I don't know if somebody else would rather do it or would also like to join if we want to have a non-quorum meeting to do it fast, to put up better signage down at the pond. I proposed some alternative wording that I wanted to see for it that put, you know, made it clear that people should educate themselves about these algae blooms and what it might mean to them, because there is no way we are going to be able to keep up with tracing it. We know that it's there. The green algae, blue-green algae that can generate the cyanotoxins has been present, but it was not producing toxins either at all or at a level that was harmful at the time that it was tested last year. But apparently those kind of conditions can change very fast. And I don't want anyone thinking that we as a town are going to be able to keep up with that kind of rapid change and respond to it, especially when, you know, Tom Trainer has been doing most of the work, going out and grabbing samples and driving to Worcester to have them analyzed and work on that. So it's takes a lot of time. There aren't as many people participating as might be needed, and whatever the funds might be needed for that, and just the turnaround times on tests. So one of the additions I want to see on the sign is just telling people to go educate themselves about what it means to swim in the water with that, what to look out for, symptoms to be aware of, that kind of thing. And there's a website where they could go do that. Another thought that some had was whether there's a script so people can call the Board of Health or the Select Board office and get some information about what it means. But I don't, one, that assumes that someone's in the office when someone's calling on Sunday afternoon when they arrive to swim with their family. That's not really going to work, I don't think. If people even have their phone to make the call as they're standing in front of the sign, perhaps they could also take a look online and get some information. So I want to post a website for further information.
You may have better cell phone reception than I do at the pond, but we usually don't have access.
Mm-hmm. So then in that case, they wouldn't be able to call the Board of Health either. So they could take a picture of the sign and research it later. I don't know. I'm thinking that it's fine for people to call, but if that's the first step, I'd rather that wasn't the first step, because
that sounds like a good non-first step.
Yeah, it's a lot of details to potentially ask the staff to be responding to.
Daryl, I did go out there yesterday, just so you know. I went around noontime, announced myself to the gate guard, and went down to the Auckland Tom Trainer for my first time. And we went over a few things, and within about 10 minutes, Jeannie Guthrie showed up, and she was talking a little bit about, the odor. They had a bad odor between the yacht club and boat launch as well in the beach. We think it was a dead fish, to be honest with you, but
it's not.
I didn't see any actual algae bloom, but we did see that the color, the clarity of the water near the ramps to get to the yacht club boats was a little cloudy. So so it's telling us there is something in that water that wasn't there before. It could be the algae dispersed and so forth, but the actual shiny blue, the blue and green algae wasn't showing up yesterday. I did check for the signage as well. They did now put a sign as you face the guard coming into the guard shack, and they have one down at the gate near the yacht entrance, boat ramp, I should say. And the beach water where they swim was pretty clear, but near where they keep the ramps to get to the boats, the docks, It was cloudy, but it was nice to meet Tom, and Tom said he was going to keep an eye on it and continue to keep in communication with us.
And so people know, the Sherborn Yacht Club has been great too, because they get a pretty good vantage point, both from the docks and from people sailing around out there. They hear about it. So the algae can be present without it being a full-grown bloom that you see scum floating on the surface, and that cloudiness is part of it, I believe. And the odors are all over, so I don't think it's a dead fish. I don't think you'd get that kind of pronounced odor.
Tom
across.
noted both. He noted the odor could be the algae, and he did note that the clarity could be the algae as well.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so that goes on. But if you meet anyone in town who's eager to get involved in an outdoorsy sort of a way, I'm sure Tom would be happy to train others to grab samples. I don't know.
Well, and he did mention that one of the ladies that works, young ladies that works at the yacht club, is in school for biology, so she's helping taking samples.
Mm-hmm. All right, so aside from COVID-19 update, which we've done a bunch of COVID stuff tonight, I don't know if anyone has anything more, but I'm happy. Are we ready to adjourn?
Well, do you want, what about the August 18th agenda items? There will be 2 variance hearings that night. And then it looks like perhaps that 124 Bogastow.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, definitely put them on.
Um,
Do we want to have them notify abutters?
They're not.
See, we don't really have a procedure in regulations about a butter notification. This is.
I don't think we require it. I think I would encourage them to do so, because if the first time it comes up.
Voluntary. I think it's voluntary because.
Okay, that's fine. It's all new, so I didn't know how you want to handle it. That's fine.
I think so. Oh, go ahead, Ellen.
Well, I was going to change the subject. So
that sounds good too.
Just so I will not be there for the August 18th meeting. I'll be on vacation. So what I will do is I will send you the Google Docs, the agenda, and I'll have the agenda posted. I'll send you the Google Docs, but I'm going away on August 5th. So that's quite a ways away from the meeting. So anything that's added, Jean can post an updated agenda. I'll post the agenda right before I leave, and then she can post an updated agenda. But she might need to just send you separately any other documents.
Okay.
That sounds totally fine, Ellen.
Yeah.
I love the Google Docs format, but I think in this circumstance, it makes a ton of sense to just kind of revert to what we've done in the past.
Yeah, that's fine.
So for the next agenda, we have
Reorganization of the board.
Yep.
COVID-19.
I can't imagine we won't have some discussion that we need to have about masking for the August 18th meeting. Just because that'll be after the follow-up with H&H.
I can't hear you, Matt.
Oh, sorry. Is this any better?
Yes.
We should post, I don't know that it'll be a joint Board of Health meeting, although I'm happy to reach out to Kay. But I think that with the timing we anticipate with the discussion of masking with the district, that we should include that as a posted agenda item.
Okay.
I just would want to make sure people had time to see that. Hopefully, again, we'll get guidance from DESI that sort of obviates the need for it, because I don't know that we need to vote to adhere to DESI guidance, but if we don't get DESI guidance, we'll need to vote on something. I'd rather have it posted than not.
So did you say that would be a joint meeting or possibly?
I think right now, let's just have it as the Sherborn meeting. I will reach out to Kay to try to resolve whether they want it as a joint meeting or not. I'll get back to you this week.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, if they can do it, I would love to have it be a joint meeting.
I think it's certainly easier. And so I anticipate that's what we'll do. I just don't know what Steve and Kay's availability is.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to make assumptions that they're available without checking with them first. But it certainly would be appealing for anything district would be a joint meeting. And that's it for me. And Lisa, I think you're away that one.
Yep, I am.
Perfect. Not perfect, but noted.
Okay, signing off.
But that's it. I mean, I think we should try to manage the agenda as much as possible. And I would favor focusing primarily on the variance hearings to the degree possible and the well permit from tonight.
Yeah.
All right. That's all I've got. Anybody else have anything else to add?
Did this job tonight. I just wanted to thank you for all your hard work.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. I appreciate it.
You did a tremendous job. It was a huge agenda tonight.
It's a big
Absolutely. And now I'm going to go eat a pudding cup.
one. That sounds yummy. Bring one over. Come on.
Yeah, I went with the martini, so okay.
All right, expect to hear,
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope Charles River is better by August 18th, so never mind. I'm hoping for the best.
Me too. Fingers crossed and knocking on wood.
Yep.
Yeah.
Here we go. Thanks,
Okay.
guys.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
Good night.